with the leadership. But when you said the Young Turks, when I remembered that, these bearded...
the term, whatever, as you say correctly, did come later.
Came later.
But remember, what made Sabasaba so significant is that in this country, it followed a pattern that was actually trending, if I may use a current term, in the world at that particular point in time, even in places like the Eastern Bloc, as they called it. But what was significant is that people who had been known leaders and who had worked with the status quo at that time of the government, some of them had left. They had parted ways with the government. And they joined this particular group of people. Okay? Now that's what made it potent.
Yep. Yep.
Right.
So today we'll be celebrating the first Sabasaba rally that happened 30 years ago, 1990. We'll be speaking with one of the organizers of that first rally, former Runyenjes MP Njeru Kathangu. He's a leader of Ford Asili. Now that we have Asili back in fashion, Ford Asili.
Yes. History repeats itself.
Yeah.
Yes.
Jubilee
Full
Asili.
circle.
Right.
Full circle. And then also we'll be discussing the budget and the impact of the budget, what the expected impact of this budget is. It's funding the Big Four. It's still focusing on the Big Four. Is the Big Four the way to go? Is it the best thing to do? And like we promised yesterday, we've got to reflect on the president's speech and the president's orders yesterday. So that also we'll be discussing later on in the show. But let's start, as we always do, with the numbers. Fellow Kenyans, in the last 24 hours.
Right, so let's look at the world numbers now. If we're looking at 11,700,000 cases around the world and 540 deaths, recovered cases, still important to look at 6,642,000 cases in the world. We still have the United States with the highest numbers in the world, and they've tipped over the 3 million case mark as of yesterday. 3,040,833. Brazil, still at about half of that, 1.6 million, now with the president of Brazil presenting with symptoms of COVID. And he's been quarantined as of yesterday. And they seem to be, getting a big blow from this, as it were. Speaking of other presidents in the world, the president of Ghana, President Nana, has gone into isolation as well, having been presenting with symptoms. A flurry of governors across Nigeria having presented with symptoms, now also going into quarantine and then going into isolation thereafter. So now we see, and like I said, a lot of people around the world take it as a far-off disease or far-off virus until it basically comes knocking at your door, and then the narrative changes. So quite a number of world leaders, where we had a spate early on, now we are seeing a lot more in terms of infections, in terms of symptoms, and Mexico still up there, presenting with about 10% of deaths in the last 7 hours of the numbers that have been found positive. And so those are 4,900 new cases in the last 7 hours. Okay, so if you want to look at the continent of Africa for now, South Africa now, last time we spoke about them, which was on Friday, there were just about 180,000 cases. South Africa now has 205,721 cases, and they've recorded about 500 deaths in the last 3 days. So that has upped the number now to 3,310. And now that they have more people presenting with symptoms, and interestingly enough in South Africa, these who have presented with symptoms have been hospitalized. So now it seems to be getting just a little bit worse. Whereas people presented and they were asymptomatic, now people are being admitted in hospital, and it's a worry note for the government of South Africa. Right, so numbers more or less remain the same in some of the countries that we've been looking at. Interestingly, though, there hasn't been a decrease, except for a few countries where we've taken notice of. But the countries around the globe continue to present with more numbers. This is, of course, because testing continues to happen. As we know it. All right, so let's look at where we are right now. In Kenya, 8,067 cases in the country, with 2,414 having recovered, with 164 deaths in the country. So we're looking at about 5,000 plus, almost 6,000 of those positive cases, some critical and some asymptomatic. So that's what we're looking at in Kenya right now.
These are, I've seen there that now India is among the top three.
Yes, India now is top
In
three
terms
with
of
720,000 cases. Remember, about a month ago, they had also, some of the things that we're talking about, they had also thought that it was time for them to release the measures that they had put in place in April. This didn't quite work because then they saw from New Delhi to Bangalore, they started to see an increase in cases, and these were now community transmissions. And so they had to now basically shut everything down. Now, as you say, having gone past Russia now, where Russia was in number 2 position at once, Brazil took over. Russia now has gone to number 4. It's interesting to see also that Peru, which again is in that area coming down from Central America into South America, following in the footsteps of Brazil, is quite high up there with 687,000. Chile as well, and Mexico struggling right now with the number of cases that they find on a daily basis. Really struggling with those numbers. They are. And obviously some of the after effects of not putting measures in place, especially with the high number of infections that came from the United States border. Yep. So.
Right. So what does that augur? How does that augur for us as we open up?
It really doesn't, because it's interesting because I saw a statistic yesterday when somebody said yesterday, all right, so Kenya locked down when there were just 7 cases and then opens up when there are 7,000. So
and when we're predicting the peak to come in September.
Right.
Right. But of course the opening up is economic.
The opening up of
livelihoods.
Yes.
Not about the health.
It was an economic decision, and that was clear. I know we're going to look at that more now later on, but it was an economic decision because the cry out for people to be released, it was not an issue of cabin fever. We're tired of being at home. It was an issue of our livelihoods have disappeared, and we need to start from, where do we start from? So I do think that decision that came out was, okay, so what do? We want to protect people as much as we can. We don't want this disease to spread, but people are hungry.
Right.
It's going to be a tough one. It's going to be a tough one. Anyway, let's continue observing. As the president said, personal responsibility now here is being called upon. Personal responsibility, something that people have gotten to a point where they're assuming this corona thing, it's getting home, it's getting closer. Now you're getting to hear more and more of people that you know about having contracted coronavirus, or at least somebody telling you that somebody that they know has been hospitalized with corona.
WHO shares that view that the president has, but they put it in a way that is so palatable. They put it in a way that is actually it's actually pleasant to digest. Because they explained by saying, you see, the truth about the way human beings function is that at the end of the day, you decide what you want to do. Yeah. At the end of the day. So what the governments need to do, what WHO needs to do, is to give you sufficient and correct information so that when you make a decision, it is based on something that is accurate and that is true.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, you always make the decision for yourself. Ultimately.
Yeah, but it's a risk calculation.
It is a risk calculation. And the example that is given is we make those decisions every day. You cross a road, it's a risk.
Yeah.
You go into business, it's a risk.
Those are daily decisions that we make.
Every single day.
Let's take a quick break, take a look at the weather, and then start taking a look at newspaper headlines. And as we do that, I'd like to remind you that you can access the Standard newspaper on your mobile device. If you've got a Safaricom mobile device with at least 20 shillings worth of airtime, just dial star 550 star 2 hash. That's star 550 star 2 hash. It'll tell you will receive a message shortly an SMS comes, it has a link. Click on the link, it opens a website, and that website gives you three options. You can either choose to read just today's newspaper at 20 shillings worth of your airtime, or you can subscribe to weekly newspaper or monthly newspapers. Okay, so whichever you choose, you get to read today's newspaper, and we'll give you a chance to win 1,000 shillings worth of Safaricom airtime. Today, we want to deal with our audience on social media. So on Twitter, if you just tag us at SpiceFMKE, we'll ask you the question, and when you reply, you just tag at SpiceFMKE, and we'll tell you how you can win 1,000 shillings worth of Safaricom airtime. Good morning.
.24/7 around the world, non-stop. This is Spice FM.
All right, we're looking at partly cloudy conditions in Nairobi right now at 14 degrees. We'll see highs of 22 and lows of 12 today. We'll carry on throughout the day, well into Wednesday morning. Nyeri is cloudy this morning at 14 degrees. Showers expected later with highs of 21. Looking into Nakuru, it's quite cloudy.
The
this
weather
morning
with
and
Spice
likelihood
FM.
of rain to start quite early. Highs of 19 and lows of 12. It's cloudy in Eldoret at 13 degrees. Thunderstorms are forecasted for a ceiling of this morning. Highs of 18 and lows of 12. It's cloudy at 19. Won't get much lower than 16 degrees in Kakamega today. Cloudy conditions currently at 17 degrees. In Mombasa, 24 degrees is partly cloudy. Range of 62. Malindi, 45 degrees. A chance of showers by highs of 30. Cloudy conditions. And low of 24. Out of Kenya into Uganda, where it's mostly cloudy at 19 degrees. Showers expected high of 24. And in Dar es Salaam, at 22 degrees, there's 32 and lows of 22. It's clear skies in Johannesburg at 8 degrees. We'll see highs of 22 and lows of 6. And those summer conditions will carry on through the Lagos, Nigeria, at 25 degrees. Clear skies in Sahel won't last long. Early this morning, a high of 28 and lows of 23. Take a look at Paris, where it's 12 degrees and clear skies all through today. 24 degrees for high and lows of 11. London at 11 degrees is partly cloudy. We'll see highs of 21. And in New York, where it's still Monday night, we will see highs of 34 today, well into the summer.
It's 22 minutes after 6. This is the situation. Amidst Kenya's biggest conversation in the room this morning. And CT Muga with today's proverb.
Pure golden sound and good
For the
talk.
sake-
94.4 Spice
I'm
FM.
wondering whether it was the third one or the first one. But now I've made up
Now
my
you've
mind.
settled.
The first one.
Settled on the first.
Mature,
sake-
intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
I am certain it was spoken of clearly.
Mornings done right.
But
94.
is clear and straightforward. For the sake of peace, hard decisions must be made. And considering what it is that we are celebrating today, believe me, there was no time when harder decisions were made than during that particular era.
For the sake of peace.
For the sake of peace. Actually, it is this. They had gotten tired of oppression. That's really what it was. They were fed up.
That got into that point.
They were fed up. There had been a long period beginning almost immediately after independence. We get independence, and then we started now reducing the gains.
Right.
And the high point was when we now formally said, by the way, this one-party system is what we are now going to amend so that it becomes the law. That was a straw that began the slow process of breaking the camel's back because people got detained. People like Kibaki, who appear to be sterling nationalists, they were supporters of that one-party system. Charles Njonjo, supporters of that particular one-party system. But there were people who were opposed to it. Now, you asked about the term Young Turks. They were part of that group. Remember, there were people who had been solidly in the government, people like Rubia, people like Shikuku. They had been in the government. But at some point, they figured, this one, no, not useful to us. They pulled. Now, the Young Turks were the Imanyaras, the Railas. They were young. They really...
The Anyonas.
The Anyonas, Kiraitu Murungi, Gibson Kamau Kuria.
Nyanyongo.
These were the Young Turks. Because they were really very young then. But what I always marvel when I think back on this is how that group represented the face of this country. It wasn't one community.
Actually, they came from across the
right across.
breadth of the country.
Yes, they did. So it meant that this was a sentiment that was actually shared by many people around the country.
At the time, that time, yes.
Yes.
And if you look at them, all of them, even going to, like the person we'll be talking to, Njeru Kathangu, looking at even Jaramogi at that point. When they were talking to Jaramogi was saying, all right, so let's bring in Bildad Kagia. Let's bring in Achieng' Oneko. Let's talk to those people who fought for independence. Let's, first of all, get their support. And then you now start seeing from across the country, from the coast, from Western Kenya.
It was from everywhere.
Everybody.
And this is what
came
gave
in.
birth to organizations that we now take for granted, like FIDA. People like Martha Koome, people like Martha Karua,
Yeah.
Bida or Aroni,
Yep.
people like Nancy Baraza. Now, these were people who were at the forefront of these things in those days. And by the way, it was very perilous to actually even make a stand against the government. It was a really tricky time.
It was. It was a direct threat to your life because there was no protection. Now we have a constitutional protection.
Yes.
If government is going to violate your rights, they are violating a constitution.
Obviously, yes, it's clear.
We do not have an all-powerful president who is, like Moi was. We were in a dictatorship. But also, we were in a dictatorship. And that's why yesterday, City, I accepted your correction that we are not in a dictatorship.
No, we are
now.
not.
We have an autocratically inclined president. Uhuru is an autocrat. His leadership style is not consultative.
It is. It's actually very consultative.
No. We can. Okay, let's not digress.
Yes.
Let's stay focused. We were in a dictatorship. Uhuru has been contained by the constitution,
What
that
I like
his
about that
authoritarianism
time is that the church
managed.
was the church then.
In fact, that's the point I was going to say.
Please.
Let us not forget, because I was looking on page 2 of the Standard, and there's an article, Sabasaba Dream Lost, says Njoya. So a journalist interviewed Njoya, Timothy Njoya, Reverend Timothy Njoya, who was obviously,
He was one of the luminaries
at the time.
Oh man, he paid a price for
there
that.
There was Njoya. Who else was there?
There was Okulu.
There was Bishop Okulu,
there
Bishop
was
Alexander
Muge.
Muge, who lost his life.
Yes.
Who lost
Archbishop
his
Manasseh
life.
Kuria.
Right. There was Mwananzeki.
Yeah.
Yes.
Dengue.
Yes.
Yes.
Dingi Mwananzeki. And they were outspoken.
They were very outspoken.
Outspoken critics of the at that time, by the way, if you remember, the maybe harshest criticisms of government in the media came from foreign press, because local media were obviously very afraid.
The stifled.
Yep.
They were stifled.
I mean, they were
Actually,
muffled.
They were stifled.
Yeah.
And so at that time, the religious leaders speaking at the pulpit represented what Kenyans wanted to say and could not say. People were, if you went into a public gathering, you didn't speak about, criticizing the government the way we do, because there was,
many publishers
Secret Service everywhere.
fled the country. People forget someone like Salim Lone was a publisher.
Right.
Some people don't even know Beden Mbugu and other. They got you sacked. Okay?
Yep.
When you appeared like you were too vociferous, your employer just sidelined you for the sake of their peace.
Their own peace.
Yes, they did.
The
So I
weekly
think,
review
like you said, there's
had been vibrant, and then at that point, when now things started getting worse, I think the gentleman had to just decide to pull back on the weekly review.
Tone down completely.
Tone down.
And Moi used very,
And that's what Kinagetobo now came up with their own magazines.
ruthless measures,
Which
recalling
were
loans,
also
recalling loans of businesses,
Yeah.
so that
Using all the tools available.
all the tools available. Yeah. So the fact that we're able to sit here and say what we say and have the conversations we do, have the social media conversations, I think it obviously is because of the sacrifices that were made during this second liberation.
Yeah.
And I think the challenge for me this morning when I was reflecting on the day is that we need to speak more about this. And the problem is our history is taught in a value neutral way. Saba Saba,
Explain value neutral.
it gives us facts, right? At least the present history gives facts to the learner. And so you learn about the white man came and colonized, but doesn't then talk about informants, the cooperators. It doesn't give you the political consciousness that allows you then to critically review issues.
Even the facts are watered down.
And then facts are watered down. So I'm not sure how Saba Saba is represented, but this should be a public holiday. Saba Saba.
This one
Our
should
Constitution Day should be a public holiday. It should be a time when we speak so that the young people can appreciate their ability to go onto social media and voice their concerns. That is because of the sacrifices that were made by those who came before.
You see, detention in the Moi era also came at a time when the world had opened up. The space that, as we call it, why I say opened up, because right around the world, there were dictators who had taken that particular title to its nth. Forget Moi. You had people like Ceausescu in Romania. The things such people did to their own people. Mobutu Sese Seko just down the road here. Equatorial Guinea, somebody called Nguema. Man, the atrocities. And then you go to Latin America, Pinochet. Man, the things those people did to their people. Some of those things are being dealt with now, today, in this day and age.
Yeah, they were actually butchers.
Yes, they were. They were. So, in comparison, Moi was mild.
We had a state.
Yes.
We actually.
I mean,
did
in
have
all
a
sincerity,
state and a nation.
compared to those people. But you see, so
the point
the point is, the movement around the world was people had gotten fed up of this sort of treatment right around the world. Now, our country, the point I was making was, it began with Kenyatta. Because detention began in Kenyatta's time.
Political assassination.
Yes, and at that time also, it was very democratic.
Right.
Yes, all you needed to do was oppose the government or appear to oppose, because to oppose the government was to oppose Kenyatta. As they used to say, Ndani. You talk about time and now. In those days, a conversation such as the one we are having, that game of Monopoly, do not pass, go straight to jail.
Straight to jail.
We would have this conversation, and you would
200
wait,
tomorrow.
because hardly you'd be not.
There'll be a Land Rover out here.
waiting for you. You go down straight.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Now, that is why, if you that memory that I was able to say, this one. You just have someone who likes flaunting the law, likes doing the wrong little thing. And we are grateful that we actually have the arms of government that check. Like the judiciary. When I hear that the judiciary or the head of the judiciary is that Logan is the president, I am very happy, because it means that if they are taking it at our odds, good for us. That's democracy in action. Parliament in the constitution. So for them I will not bring into this debate. There are let down to this, yes, this parliament. There are let down
Everything else. Take a break and take a look at traffic. And as we do that, I'd like to give out 1,000 shillings worth of discount on airtime. If you read the standard newspaper on your mobile device, star 550 star 2 hash, that's star 550 star 2 hash. Today we want to award our audience on Facebook. We are live streaming Spice FM KE on Facebook, Spice FM KE on Twitter, and Spice FM KE on YouTube. So for our Facebook audience, we would like to go to Facebook and answer this question, our Facebook page, and answer this question. So there's a story somewhere between page 9 and page 12 of the Standard this morning. It says, court aid arraigned after file vanishes. This is a story about a clerk at the Shanzu Law Courts who was yesterday held over a missing file involving a multi-million shillings narcotic case. So the allegation here is that this file went missing. It involved some people who've been charged with having been caught in possession of cocaine worth 2 million shillings. Two other people were arrested. An officer in charge of the court archives and another suspect who is alleged to have bribed the clerk, and the clerk received 500,000 shillings. $500,000 shillings to just disappear this particular file. Just make it vanish. Hot aid arraigned after file vanishes. And what page is this story in this one? What page? Let's just go to Facebook, plus FMKE. Post your comment there and answer that question. Our social media user, Mr. Amadou, is going to pick the winner.
All right, let's kick things off on Kangudaro this morning, where it's actually looking very good, flowing very smoothly this morning. The likelihood of seeing some outbound traffic on Thika Road today is quite high, but let's take a look at that in a short while and see what may change. We will see a holdup of traffic on Mombasa Road between Cabanas and the JKIA turnoff, as well as moving towards General Motors. It's still early times though, so let's wait a bit and see when we get into traffic hour proper what it's going to look like. Anything jumps out at you early enough, do let us know. Spice FMKE on Twitter, that's how you can reach us. Let us know what you see. Hopefully it will not be too crazy of a Tuesday.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah!
You're listening to Spice FM. Traffic.
So the big headline in all the day is what we're discussing. We'll just have a quick glance at it. And this is the reopening. It's freedom for now, but what next? This is rules and all the options are limited. And the president chose to err on the side of caution to ease the travel.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
Will Kenyan behave?
Personal responsibility.
Yep.
Like we were saying earlier, he did not have a choice. This decision was made by the various earlier decisions that government has made in terms of the economic reality, as we discussed yesterday. And yes, I think we are, Uhuru is saying Jisotini. We might not like it, but that's what it is. And I think we need to, at this point, and I like what you said, Siti, the WHO approach to this. And yesterday, as we were speaking to the governor, Alfred Mutua, the one thing I missed was the public participation, because he kept talking about, the chiefs,
about himself.
Yeah, apart from that, he talked a lot about himself, but in terms of enforcement, he kept talking about the, security and the administration. And, I was like, we're the citizens. At the end of the day, it is us. And Kenyans are the ones who hold up this country. We'll be talking about the budget. In terms of healthcare, Kenyans pay for their own healthcare. About almost 30% of Kenyans support healthcare provision in terms of what they pay. Out of pocket. When you look at water, yes, we're given water, but we also pay for that. We pay for our education. So Kenya, unfortunately, we are very disempowered and believe our political leaders do development for us. And we don't appreciate enough that our development leaders do a little bit, but the more of it falls on us. So I think this is a time for us to really go back to that and own this. And so I think my approach to this is going to be, as far as possible, to keep telling people, you and those around you, let us take responsibility, take charge, and observe these regulations. And I think the other thing we need to do is to build solidarity. Because as Julius Nyerere said, Kenya is a man-eat-man society. And that is why you'll have people saying that, me, I'm okay. And getting out there, not realizing COVID is not about you. And I was telling this to our daughter yesterday. COVID isn't about you because you and your friends, you're 23, 24 years old. You're okay. Even if you get infected, you're okay.
Yeah.
But, think about
Chances
us.
are.
You're going to bring it home to us. And that was quite sobering to her because we've been getting into these conversations where she starts touting these alternative theories about COVID. And I said, theory aside, think about the people in your life who are vulnerable, and it is for them that you take care.
Yep.
Yeah,
Indeed.
that's just the point.
It's all about
Yeah.
personal responsibility. So, schools, that conversation still happening again.
Well, we're going to hear today. I think what they were given was essentially 24 hours to make that. So the decision has been made, but I think he left that to the Ministry of Education to make that announcement to the public today. We're likely to see that candidates will come back to school in September and everybody else will come back in January or after January. But we'll wait and see, speculation aside. Still, one of the hot spots for education, or rather for high infections, if they're released back, because if we're still playing along those timelines of September being where we will see the peak of infections in Kenya, then it's quite risky to put children back into the system at that point. But we can understand to some extent that those who had prepared mentally or otherwise for exams in November, December, likelihood is that they would be allowed to come back to school under these strict regulations and measures, whatever those would be. I think it was also interesting, not because I'm very excited that something will be done about it, but interesting that it received a national mention when it came to the issues of violence and gender-based violence and domestic violence and the violation of children's rights and teenage pregnancies. That came into being, a task force being set up to look into this, but I don't know how excited I am about it going beyond a probe. Pinpointing the reasons behind why, perhaps, but it's something that has been around for a very long time. It has been exacerbated by COVID, but it is still a problem in this country, around many countries. So I'm not quite sure what the probe will yield, but I note that that was mentioned. Alongside all these measures, I didn't expect it to come yesterday. But it did. It's been given some attention.
Can I chime in on that? Because when you're looking at SGBV, sexual gender-based violence, if you listen to the lobby, because yes, there is this spike of domestic violence cases, but if you listen to the lobby around SGBV, SGBV is underfunded. SGBV is also treated as is under internal security. The budgets are under the security line. SGBV is not properly decentralized because it's under the national government, but at county level, counties then have a very strong role in terms of they've got gender ministries. They also have the social services. So there is a gap in SGBV. We looked at the budgets. It was about 2 years back and realized they get a minuscule amount of money to enable us put together the infrastructure to deal with the reporting, to deal with the education, to deal with rescue centers, to really deal with SGBV.
Who gets this small amount of money?
It was under security.
So what does the Ministry of Gender
So there's
do?
gender, but gender has a smaller budget than the security.
So security is in dealing with reported cases, post-reporting, and handling of that.
Exactly. So if you listen to and you've hit it. It's the security approach as opposed to the SGBV people who will be dealing with prevention, who will be dealing with education, who will be dealing with
the social services,
the social aspects. So part of the problem, and I think, and I hope the lobby, and I think we all need to use COVID as an opportunity to push for the things that need to happen, is we need to ensure that social issues get the attention that they need. One of the this is one of them in terms of let's get enough resourcing, let's get a proper alignment, let's get the responsibilities, as well as let's continue to have the conversation. On education, I would also say similarly. If you look at what happened with the judiciary, and it's a little bit different in terms of the resource outlay, but the judiciary, I think, was hit by COVID and went into a small panic mode and probably didn't think they'd be able to administer any sort of justice. But then, sat down and looked at themselves, and now they are saying, in fact, we are going to keep, part of our services are going to remain online for moving forward, because they've seen the advantageous, the benefits of doing this. Now, look at education and the laptop project. Look at electricity and the last mile connection project. Why hasn't the president taken this opportunity to ensure that we then now build up the digital connectedness of schools? Because looking at the experience of trying to open up schools in other countries, it hasn't worked. And we are having a asymmetry where private schools that do have access to digital learning, are continuing to learn. And it's the public schools that are not learning. And this is a gross injustice to keep children at home, not properly supported, because government will not reallocate the money to complete the good projects it stated as kind of political campaign promises. But I would like to hear KNUT calling the government and insisting, can we digitize learning and make it accessible by supporting, completing these, calling on these campaign promises to come to reality. Yeah. So I think the question for us is, are we going to let the president get away with it? And I think yesterday again, City, you talked about this in terms of the messaging, in terms of how other countries have organized themselves. But I think we set such a low bar for the things the president says to Kenyans. And it's high time we say, no, sorry, it's not good enough for you to say it's up to us and we're going to have a task force. We know what happens to task forces. They just take the steam out of issues and buy government a little bit of time. And in the end, government does nothing. They are still going to build this express motorway that's eating up money that could otherwise go into funding education, making sure kids get to learn from September, and ensure we deal with SGBV.
13 minutes to 7. As we take this quick break into a quick commercial break, let's inform you about the Kenya Ports Authority. Kenya Ports Authority has a lot of services that it offers. So many people, when they hear Kenya Ports Authority, they think of the port of Mombasa, right? But Kenya Ports Authority manages all these ports along the Kenyan coastline, including Mombasa, Lamu, Malindi, Mtwapa, Kiunga, Shimoni, Punji, and Vanga. Where is the Vanga port?
Okay, but thank you for the education.
It's near the border of Kenya.
And the Punji.
Shimoni actually.
This is what information is all about.
And Shimoni is actually
so there's a port there.
Yeah.
But these are not like huge commercial.
Not really, but also there. One of the reasons why some of those ports, because the Navy has some activity in some of those areas. Okay, because again, as I said, it's near the border. Now, when you go towards Lamu, people only think of Lamu. They don't think of Kiunga. No.
Yep.
Kiunga is that side of Lamu. As Eric is saying correctly, just know your country.
It's on the side of Lamu.
Upande huo.
Okay.
Yes.
So we're starting
But
from...
there's the left out, Kisumu.
Yes, there's also now the inland. It also manages now the inland waterways. There's
Yes,
the
it
Kisumu
does.
port.
Yes.
There are the inland container depots in Nairobi, Embakasi, Eldoret.
Yes.
Now there's a new one in
Naivasha.
Naivasha.
Yes.
Right? So all these are basically under the Kenya Ports Authority. And if you'd like to know more about the Kenya Ports Authority, now they've basically come up with a portal that gives you all the information about what they do and what the services that they offer, and especially the process of documents, what you need to do to get your cargo into or out of the port. Just go to kpa.co.ke/Captain Cargo. Captain Cargo is Kargo. That's Captain Cargo. And this new portal is an information portal by Kenya Security. I'm telling you more about it. It's a situation room. Kenya's biggest conversation in the room this morning is Eric Larson.
Spice FM, Malindi.
We are looking at the newspaper headlines and big stories in the papers this morning. There's one here on page 11 of The Nation. Bold move by the EACC.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
Watch out for the graft watchdogs intervention. A government supplier would have pocketed 150 million shillings for school lab equipment that never did.
Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Contract given to Vulcan Lab equipment is how the tender was awarded by a hurriedly former irregular tender committee whose members included a gateman. Details of the corruption deal have been exposed by a recent Court of Appeal decision to stop the government from paying the supplier 150 million shillings. The contract, which has been the subject of a legal fight for 9 years, was awarded by the School Equipment Production Unit, a state agency under the Education Ministry, way back in 2009. The tendering that the court described as corrupt adventurism began in July of that year, 2009, when the agency approached Vulcan for a quotation for the supply of various science equipment and lab chemicals. They supplied zero. The contract was so vague, the story says, that there was no detail of how the figure of 226 million shillings was arrived at, and neither did it contain in its short body particulars, specifications, or quality of goods to be provided. ESCC wins again.
Oh yeah, well done to them. I'm so excited.
I like this
Eurobond
movement.
lost 215 B, so it's good, but it's not, it's good, but this case, first of all, it's a 2009 case. Hold on, sorry. It's a 2009 case. The water is splashing. It's a 2009 case. So if we are taking 10 years to resolve cases of 150 M,
Yep.
we can safely say there is no war on corruption. We just say that your chances of getting indicted for corruption are the same as the COVID chances. We are at what, 2.5?
2.5 to 3%.
Bus.
chance of contracting COVID.
It
This is
might
an issue
even
that has
be
been
lower
raised by
with
everybody
corruption.
in that system. They talk about the duration it takes to resolve cases, not just the corruption cases, even murder cases where somebody is taken to jail for, like now this one in this took a short time. 3 jailed for 45 years each for killing a man that they were accused of being a wizard in Kilifi. These 3 gentlemen, they saw this old elderly man, killed him, and they have now been jailed for 45 years. This case was taken to court in 2017.
Right,
Okay,
so
that
you're
is a bit
saying what?
fast.
Delayed justice.
In terms of how long it takes for these wheels of justice to turn.
But it's which cases?
Especially for corruption cases.
Corruption, land cases.
Where
Especially depends
where
on
the
who.
perpetrator has money.
I think
Thank
it depends
you.
on
To-
the individual that's
delay
being tried.
to delay the process.
Yeah,
Actually,
it depends on
let's
the
go to
sway that
court.
you have,
Yeah.
either
Apply this
politically or
application
financially.
there, go to a higher court,
Let's
When
ask-
file a
students
frivolous case
cheat during exams, action is taken on those
on the
two.
spot.
Within 3 months, you hear issues have been settled. So it depends on who.
In the days I was a school teacher, I was also an examiner. One of the things I found particularly interesting is every once in a while you would come across a paper that you've been given to mark. There were booklets. I was marking something called Literature Paper 1. And on 2 occasions, I encountered 200 shillings and also 100 shillings with a small note. Sir, please help me and make me pass.
What?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I called.
This thing is real, man.
I'm just trying to explain to you. And
Yes.
this is something I did in the 1980s. Late 1980s. Now, if you want to talk about corruption and the anatomy of it in this country, pause, take what the governor of Machakos told us yesterday, that this particular government, as we know it, during its first term, was clearly divided. It was a Nusumkate government. Take that. So when you talk about corruption, ask yourself this question. When this happened, forget the people you hear, those players, those are sideshows.
Who are the beneficiaries?
Who was the minister? Who was the PS? Just ask that question first. And then ask, who are they aligned to?
Yeah. Whose interest were they protecting?
Yes, or were they carrying out? Now, if you were to ask that question with regards to some of the cases that we've had, all right, let's say SGR. When it started during the Kibaki era, who was the minister? And who was the PS? It is not difficult. We know. When we signed those deals, who was the minister? Who was the PS? And you will certainly ask, then you ask yourself, when we had the Aror and Kimaror dam issues, who was the minister and who was the PS? That one was settled because, and they want to ask the all-important question, are they still walking free in this Kenya?
Where are they today?
Now, when you ask those questions, then you are in a position to understand this simple thing that I also said yesterday. We know where our money went.
It's not difficult.
It's not difficult
Yes.
to
So
track. And
You might not be able to prove it.
Yes, but you have to
Yes.
ask, because the issue is not who took it, who was responsible for it at that point in time. They should be able to assist us in understanding where it went. So that's when I say we know where our money went. The people who are responsible are alive and walking free in Kenya.
In
the
fact, the
amendments that have
problem
been
is
proposed in the miscellaneous amendment that now calls for special courts to be set up, and there's a timeline for corruption cases. They should be complete within 2 years. That's a good step.
It's a
And
very
also
good
the other
step.
amendments, because they're addressing some of these issues. Case goes to court, case must be complete within a certain timeline.
I think the 2 years timeline is good. Makes sense. We also want to see that government will fund the judiciary. We'd also like to see the president stop interfering with judicial appointments. Do you know? There's
That
a whole.
one, that one won't stop.
We're coming to the top of the hour. C.T. Muga, today's proverb.
Today's proverb, for the sake of peace, hard decisions must be made. This is a Tanzanian saying.
Okay. Keep it right here. This is the Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. In the next hour, let's talk about budgets, all right, and our budget making process and the current 2020-2021 budget, what it means for us. Good morning. It's a Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. Remember, we are live streaming on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, as well as www.spicefm.co.ke. It's 7 o'clock.
All right, it's not looking so bad this Tuesday morning. We're going to have the normal issues that we have here and there. Twitter Road traffic is flowing very smoothly. Coming into the CBD from Thika Road, also not so bad. Outbound, we have a little bit of traffic heading in that general direction. Coming off of Mombasa Road as well, not too terrible right now. We're likely to see a build-up right around the SGR and then heading down towards General Motors. All right, looking at not so bad either. Hopefully not.
Spice up your life.
Let us know what you see, however. Spice FM KE. Reach us on Twitter. If something jumps out at you in your neck of the woods, let us know.
Traffic.
Gotta keep people moving.
This is the Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation Room, witty, political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher, academic, seasoned political observer, a fountain of wisdom in these politically uncertain times. Ndu Ogo, Nigerian by birth, Kenyan by choice, communications expert, Pan-Africanist, a truth seeker and believer in people power, and Eric Latin, agent provocateur, the man in the chair, seasoned journalist, news hound, a man who believes in punching up, not down. This is the Situation Room.
Star 550 star 2 hash. And this morning we were looking at a story and we're asking, on what page is this particular story in the Standard this morning? And this story is about a court aide who was arraigned after a file vanished. A clerk at the Shanzu Law Courts was yesterday held over a missing file involving a multi-million shilling narcotics case. The clerk was arrested by detectives after the said file went missing from the magistrate's chambers, where it was under lock and key. The case involved an accused charged with being in possession of cocaine worth 2,017,000 shillings. The two other people were also arrested, an officer in charge of the court, archives, and another suspect who is alleged to have bribed the clerk. This clerk is alleged to have received 500,000 shillings to get into this place that is under lock and key and make the file disappear. So we were asking, on what page is that in today's Standard? And we wanted to award our audience on Facebook. Coril Leonard, who says he's streaming live from South B Massive. You win this one. Court aide arraigned after court vanishes. And that is the headline of the story. And you say it's on page 10 of the Standard this morning. Absolutely correct. Coril Leonard, congratulations to you. Social media producer Amlioto will be getting into your inbox and giving you the details of how you are going to win the 1,000 shillings worth of Safaricom airtime. Well done. Now, let's talk about budget. Right, Wajiro?
Right.
What about the budget?
Of course, we're at the beginning of a new financial year. We are also facing the ravages of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
The ravages on the economy, the pressure on the health system. Like we were discussing, we have children out of school. So government, through the budget, needs to make choices about what to prioritize in the coming year. COVID has found the president, the government, at a point where they have prioritized the big four flagship projects, which are, really the president's flagship projects. They are projects that are national, that seek to provide economic growth, but they also have a very strong attachment to the administration, because every administration wants to say, this is what we did. And so, if you recall, last year, the president unveiled the Big Four, which was focusing on agriculture, building houses, and, also the health, universal health care. So the decision to be made right now is, where should the money go? And the government has, prepared the budget, has a budget, actually, that has a set of priorities that when we look, that actually has been criticized, not even just by civil society actors, but even the Parliamentary Budget Office did a critical review and said, we need a budget that stabilizes the economy, that cushions those affected. And so we need to put a stop, maybe put on hold some of the development projects which are, based on growth because of COVID. So COVID actually needs to make us stop and redirect the finances. So our concern is that this hasn't happened. And so we've asked a budget expert who the International Budget Partnership works on budget processes. They build capacities of citizens, actually, to monitor the budget, to be involved in the budget, because public finance management in Kenya is guided by principles of transparency, public participation, and accountability. And IBP is very key in terms of promoting, those principles, working with communities, and also working with the Senate and the National Assembly and Treasury at that, in terms of giving advice. Yeah. So we are very fortunate. Today we'll be joined by
Abraham Regal is a country manager at International Budget Partnership Kenya. Good morning, Abraham.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you doing?
We're well, thank you. Welcome to the Situation Room.
Thank you very much.
You've heard the introduction that Wanjiru has given to this topic that we're discussing this morning.
Yes.
It's about the budget. So just shooting straight off, your basic and immediate views on the budget that was presented to Parliament and the budget that's now in effect.
Yeah. So thank you very much. The budget that was presented, of course, every year the government, that is the executive government, both at the national and county level, tables their budget estimates for the coming financial year on 30th of April. But because there is an East African precedent of reading the budgets at the same time, the minister still comes to read the statement, and you noted it was highlights of the budget. So the actual budget had already been presented. By the time it was being discussed, actually it had been approved.
Yeah.
Now, this budget was, of course, every budget has been incremental. In other words, the budget for the following year is always higher than the previous one. But this one came at a time when we were expecting some real injection of realism and reality of what was going on. And this is because of the situation presented by COVID. But even before COVID came, already economic activity had been on a decline in the previous year. By the time we were closing the calendar year 2019, by 31st of December, we had missed revenue targets by close to about 200 billion.
Yeah.
And now that's not a small amount. When you have missed your target by close to 10%, you then need to start asking yourself questions. And this was really being affected because of job losses, of companies shutting down. So my take of this budget is that I felt it did include a deficit that was too big to handle. Because the current deficit at 841 billion, assuming the grants that are assured for projects will come. So grants are monies that are given to a country by different development partners. And that is assuming they will come. Otherwise, if they don't come, then the deficit is likely to shoot to the upwards of 1 trillion.
Yep.
But at the same time, the public debt, so the loans that we are paying as a country, the repayment was already increasing. And this year alone, we are at 904 billion.
Yep.
904 billion against an expected ordinary revenue, or basically, and it's like, you earn 100 shillings, and already you are expected to spend about 50 shillings of that on paying debt.
Yep.
So that for me was really the measure that you have a deficit that is even, is almost at the same level or as
your debt,
non-discretionary expenditure.
Right.
In other words, there's no negotiation. So you have two figures that you have to know what to do with. For me, that worries. But on the positive side, I felt that the 8-point stimulus agenda that the president stated, and also that had got money, was a move in the positive direction, only that I felt it could have been given a bit more policy and cash attention. So
explain that. When you say that it may have required a lot more policy and cash attention, in what shape and form does that come?
So when you look at the entire economic stimulus program, it's budgeted to spend about 56 billion. Now, 56 billion in a budget of 3.2 trillion. And a GDP of about close to 10 trillion. What basically that means, it's a drop in the ocean. When you say, for instance, Kazi Mtaani to create jobs for 100,000 youths, when you have close to 5 million, if not more, of youths who are unemployed, then again, that's a drop in the ocean. So I felt it could have been given. Of course, it is not that the only money that will be spent in the economy is around the economic stimulus program, but already, because of the things I have said before, where you have a huge public debt obligation of close to 1 trillion, which means that's not money you can inject in the economy. That's money that is going out of the economy directly. And then what you are injecting for direct mitigation, because the others are more health mitigation. So the amount of money that has been given to Ministry of Health, it's more health mitigation in terms of ensuring their PPEs, in terms of testing is possible, in terms of more doctors and nurses to be able to take care. But in terms of direct employment creation that is meant to save companies, small and medium enterprises, I feel there is still more space. And that is only to be managed by you creating more room, basically giving yourself more room within your budget to be able to move money around. Because basically how it works, the more debt you have to pay, the higher the deficit, then it means that you only have so much that you can continually inject into the economy. And again, it's based on an assumption that economic activity will resume as soon as tomorrow. So as soon as today, with the president opening the movement in Mombasa and Nairobi. But that's not how the economy works. Economy works when there is money circulating within the economy, and therefore consumption. But when you have so many people who have lost their jobs, and they're technical, it's you and I actually who run the economy. Because it's those who are employed who are able to employ a house help, a gardener. When they go to the office, they have somebody washing their car at the car wash. They go to the barber. And they're the ones who organize the gigs where then the DJs will come and play, will organize the parties. So you see, and those are the people who are losing their jobs.
Yep.
So they need to see all the connections of the dots.
So what is the role of business people if those who are in employment seem to have taken the helm of ensuring that the economy continues functioning?
Sorry? The role of?
Business people, what is their role?
Business people, their survival is dependent on whether there is money flowing in the economy. Now, one of the biggest consumers within the economy, inevitably, is government. Because they are the ones who purchase certain goods, certain services. But at the same time, remember, people only purchase if they have the means and they are wherewithal to do that. Therefore, the business people can't bring their goods. They can provide their goods and their services. But if there is no demand, there is no even if there is, people want but they cannot afford, then it becomes very difficult to say that the business. For instance, you don't expect business people to inject money into the economy, because they depend on that economy to be able, it's like oxygen. Money is like oxygen. They basically depend on it when it's circulating and when there is money moving.
Yeah.
And that is all connected with employment, or rather means of income. I don't think employment is the right word. Everybody having a means of income, a household income. But at the same time, remember, if you think about the business people who run businesses that depend on selling goods, for instance, from China, from all these countries, the supply chain had been disrupted for the better part of last year, and it got worse at the beginning of this year with the COVID. You remember some time back, even the president taking personal attention on the number of containers that had remained stuck
Yep.
at the port of Mombasa for quite some time, almost a year. And those who are goods that the businessmen had to pay for the loans and what have you, but they didn't have the goods to sell. So it's that circulation, and I don't think it's right to depend on businesses to try and resuscitate the economy. That's the job of government.
Yeah, so there's economic experts, I believe your institution as well, the Parliamentary Budget Office, have been, made proposals into this budget, really focusing or advocating for stabilization rather than stimulus. Listening to you, obviously the government hasn't quite bought this agenda, that the priority now needs to be to stabilize the supply and the demand side of the economy as opposed to shooting for growth. How else can we get government to listen? And if they're not going to, what are we likely to see happen?
Thanks, Wanjiro. When you read the report of the Budget and Appropriations Committee that is chaired by Kimani Ichung'wah, and you read the input of the Parliamentary Budget Office, it says the very things we are talking about. What is surprising is that even after having made all the observations that they made, they still went ahead and approved the budget as was. So then this takes it to a realm of politics, and I think it is right to say, I think the executive needs to be a bit more realistic. I agree that the goal is to stabilize things before you try to create stimulus package. And how do you stabilize? The goal here was to make sure that companies don't shut down, that people don't lose their jobs, that people don't go into, the economy doesn't get into a mess. But remember, the amount of money that was available to be able to move around in the economy had shrunk so much because of the public debt obligation and the pension obligations, and a continuation of business as usual, even when things were already starting to show a red sign. So I think I still push this to Parliament, because that is where the responsibility, in all honesty, lies. Because they approved this. They saw the deficit of 841 billion. They raised the same concerns. They made the same. You remember John Buddy raising these very concerns that our deficit is unacceptable. Our debt repayment to revenue ratio is out of shape completely.
Yeah.
Because you can't be planning to spend about 60 shillings out of every 100, and the 100 shillings is an expected income in the future. It's not money you have
It's
in
not.
the bank.
It's not cash in hand.
But I thought
It's not
this
cash in
same
hand.
parliament also plays a part in allowing the country to raise its its borrowing capacity.
I mean, definitely. You see, once you approve a deficit, you technically approve the borrowing. There's
So then why do they then turn around and talk about the debt that we have as though they do not know what it is and that they didn't participate in actually bringing it to what the levels it's at?
For me, I find that not right. I mean, both at all levels. Morally, it's not right. Legally, one could argue yes, but already the PFM Act has already been flaunted, although it was changed now that our absolute debt is an absolute. I mean, our debt is an absolute figure, not a percentage.
Not a percentage, yes.
Abraham, you allude to some kind of, political inclination when it comes to making some of these decisions. But I look at other countries in the world who go through the same budget-making process with individuals who are also politically inclined, but for some reason they're able to set that political inclination aside and make a decision that is right for the country. What needs to happen for these steps then to be taken? Because it seems to be an excuse that we use time without number, not just in Kenya, by the way, but in quite a number of countries, even in sub-Saharan Africa. And we say, all right, this decision was made because somebody was politically inclined, they leaned a certain way. But if we're looking at the whole picture, where a country is either saved or destroyed, then that cannot continue to be an excuse in terms of decisions and how they are made. So what needs to happen? What steps then need to be realized? And for people to understand, and when I say people, I mean the people for whom it matters, the masses, the population, huge. What needs to happen for us also want to understand that this is how the process should actually work. And I ask this because I find that when people have an understanding of how the process should work, then even in the agitation then takes a different trajectory. So what really should the process be?
So I don't think we have a process problem because, if you look at our PFM Act, our Constitution, and the process that has been established, there are very clear steps. Technically the budget is actually normally approved in February because that is when we have a document called the Budget Policy Statement that states the broad spending lines that even anticipates what will be the revenue expectation for the coming financial year. Remember, this is 4 months before the end of the financial year. Now, our democracy, as per the Constitution, is a parliamentary representative democracy. In other words, we have moved a lot of the representation decisions of oversight, of legislative making, and of representation to Parliament. And that is why then every document, particularly on budget matters, right from the country's development plan and the county at the county level, coming to the budget policy statement, which basically outlines the broad sectoral spending. All these documents are approved. So by the time the budget estimates come to the House, they have gone through a process of conversation, and I think I'll just then be just saying, then we have a system that has completely gone wrong to the core.
Yeah.
Because what pains me is that when you read the documents from Parliament, they say the very things I am saying, the very things we are worried about.
Why do you say it's a system? Why do you say that we have a system that has gone wrong?
When I say a system has gone wrong, is a system that observes that the patient is sick, but still goes ahead to send him back to work.
No, it's not the system. Systems are created and managed by people.
Okay, you get where I'm going with this.
Same.
That yes, we have a system by the Constitution. You see, we are not talking of it's not something that somebody does what they think and imagine. We have a framework that we have approved in laws. We have a framework that we have approved in the Constitution. We have institutions of Parliament. We have the institution of the National Treasury. The concerns we are talking about are concerns that have been observed. But why then things continue on a trajectory of business as usual? I think for me it's a worrying. What then should the people do? I think we have not maximized the possibility of people's petitions, which I think is critical. Is critical. So it's
Should
a
we not
critical.
ask the question why it is that our elected leaders and other leaders who are appointed, should we not ask the question why it is they all seem to make decisions that benefit them individually?
Well, that.
Because everything that we are saying, the decisions that are made in Parliament, the decisions that are made elsewhere, it all seems to point to not what will benefit the country, but what those who help make those decisions will benefit from the decisions that they make, and then damn the rest of us.
I think the challenge is, and you're right on that, that a key part of our politics has really become almost a mechanism of personal gain from public processes. And as you were discussing slightly earlier, that all the corruption cases that we now are messing us up have to do with actually that use of public resources in ways that are not right. But as I'm saying, the role of representation, unless we change the constitution, unless we change our laws, lies straight right now within the framework of Parliament.
So, Abraham, what you're telling us is, I think, something we know, but it's useful. You're saying Parliament goes up to the point of giving us a very credible report.
Yes.
But the decision they make is still political. And so the problem we have is how to deal with the political culture.
And the decision is not political. The decision is commercial. How
but it's made within a political
how
space.
They stand to benefit. It's not political.
Right, but what we are saying, if we are to diagnose the problem that we have, it's with the political, because it's our
You're right.
political representatives are not protecting our interests.
They most definitely aren't.
And this is a problem that we changed the constitution and we have generated a lot of laws, and we are still trying to get political accountability.
I actually don't.
How do we get political accountability?
I don't even think they even consider us.
It's not that. Look, let's
We're
just
not
be very
even
clear.
in their thought
We're not
process.
in their
We don't feature.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. It's like we are hoping there's going to be some kind of miraculous change from the very beginning. Because, okay, let's take an example as a court of law. When you're trying an individual, what is the one thing that they look at? They look at the intent. And the intent then is what, in many cases, they use to prove their case. The intent for majority of political leaders from the very beginning was not in the interests of the people. So if you look at it from the very beginning, if your intent was something totally different, there's no way you're going to ask somebody in the middle of all of this to please change your interests and now start suddenly to do things or to legislate in a manner that is going to benefit the people. If it was never in your agenda from the beginning, it is very difficult to change a course when you've already started the journey.
The only thing that they consider or where they put the wananchi into consideration is what they think the wananchi will want to hear. For instance, those lovely reports. Oh, Parliament has given a lovely report. And then they go and do the complete opposite of what they have suggested. So, at that point, we do not feature.
It's a mix. It's a mix of everything from where I see. There's a commercial side, there's a political side, and then there's and I keep going back into two institutions. One is the National Assembly. This is a budget-making parliament as per our constitution.
Yes.
And
Yes,
then
that's correct.
they are the officers at the National Treasury. And I keep asking, so yes, we talk about these people are sharp. I mean, each one of them has very good credentials. They come up with this budget. They advise the government on how to the next steps to take. The political decision makers have already come and said, this is what I'd like. They've come with their wish list. This is what I'd like to do in the next financial year. The people at the National Treasury come up with a solution, which is what we see being taken to Parliament. Parliament sits and they can clearly see that there are mistakes here and there, and some of these mistakes are definitely politically influenced. But Parliament goes ahead and writes a report, but goes ahead to approve that report because of the politics, and that's why I see the politics coming into it. It's the political play. How many do we have? What are the numbers that we have in Parliament? Who are we answerable to? Are we answerable to the people, or are we answerable to the powers that be in the executive? And if they feel that they're more answerable to the powers that be at the executive, then they will sing to the executive's tune. And this is where now the whole chain goes around and around. Because like you're saying, Abraham, report is taken to Parliament. The Committee on Budget and Appropriations looks at it. The Parliamentary Budget Office looks at it, pokes holes, and says, for instance, we have been implementing a Big Four agenda, and yet we don't have an implementation matrix. First things, what are these milestones that we should be looking out for every year when you're approving the new budget? We don't have those clearly labeled milestones on saying, all right, on healthcare, this is where we should be as we are approving the next budget. They said that in their report. You don't have milestones, you don't have an implementation matrix, and this is all wrong. But then when it comes to voting, the political decision is then made to go ahead.
Yeah.
I think it's right to say that the way our budget. So I try to say that this is not really so much a process issue, as it were. But as you've rightly noted, it's really the mix of the technical and the politics, and the politics seem to carry the day. But more importantly, not just the politics within Parliament, but even the politics of the executive. And I think you've rightly observed that. Our concern has been how then do we utilize the same institutions for purposes of achieving that which is important. And as I've said, I think there's still a lot of space for people's petition. One of the things that has been very concerning, at least for me, is that there is still very few people who say anything when this budget process is happening.
Yep.
And I appreciate that some of us feel that maybe it's a waste of time. But the truth of the matter is it's better when it's on record that we have raised certain concerns, that we have raised certain observations, than when we say, no, let them just do what they want to do. They are our representatives at the end of the day. That may not be happening the way we desire, but I still feel that there is still a lot of space to people's petitions, to people raising their concerns, even when things do not necessarily go the way we expect. Because, for instance, right now, I mean, let's be very honest, our revenue projections are not adding up. So the 1.64 trillion that we are expecting to collect, with the expectation that, for instance, even with the reopening, Kenyans are more excited with the reopening to try and run away from their problems. So if you are really feeling painful in the city, you run to the village. If you are locked up in the village, you run back. But it's not necessarily to come and do any economic activity per se. Tourism, the summer bunnies are not coming. So we don't expect much of, again, a touristic activity, even if the fees have been halved.
So basically, we are unlikely to collect 1.6 trillion shillings this year, if we did not even collect it last year.
We didn't collect it. I mean, the financial year that just ended 7 days ago, we missed our revenue target by a huge margin. This year, I think my estimation is about 1.4, at most 1.5 trillion. And with 900 billion already going for debt, then you're left with just about 600. But let me add something else.
Let's take a quick break, Abraham. And let's take a quick break, take a look at traffic, and when we come back, we'll now go into that and also look at the citizen participation and what exactly this citizen participation should look like in terms of understanding our budget-making process and, the leeways that we have or the avenues that we have to question and challenge what we see happening.
Sure, thank you.
This is a Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation, 27 minutes to 8.
Classic soul, R&B, smooth jazz, neo soul, and nostalgic ballads.
Make some noise. Yeah!
You're listening to Spice FM.
Surprise, surprise. Thika Road is a huge mess. In and outbound traffic today on both sides. All service lanes absolutely jam-packed today. It's back to normal on the roads. Now that everybody has been let loose, it's open season for everybody. Thika Road is terrible today, and no matter where you look. So it's going to need... this recipe for disaster is going to need a dash of patience. Today, we'll have a look at it in a bit and see maybe there's an opening that you could get out of. So if you're not in a hurry, Thika Road is not where you want to go today. Waiyaki Way outbound is jam-packed, bumper to bumper, and it seems that people were actually quite eager to leave the city. Looking at pictures of Thika Road today, and it's an absolute mess, that's for sure. Ngong Road also is not so bad right now. The fog is quite low towards Dagoretti, but it's quite free as well. Okay, so we're going to keep an eye on Thika Road today. Mombasa Road right around the SGR, then moving towards the JKIA turn off. A little bit of traffic there, but not too terrible as yet. Tell us what it looks like in your area. Spice FMKE on Twitter, trying to keep it moving, but it already looks like it's going to be epic today. But we have hope.
23 minutes to 8 o'clock. It's a situation room. Kenya's biggest conversation on Spice FM. In the room, CT Muga, Nduoko, Eric Lati, Fonjiro Gikonyo, and on the line is Abraham Rugo, who is the country manager for International Budget Partnership Kenya. And we are talking about budget and looking at the 2020-2021 budget and, what it seeks to finance. And already Abraham is talking about, the huge deficit, the huge debt, and revenue projections. That's where we were, Abraham, before we went to that break.
Yeah.
Revenue projections. You're saying that at best you see us managing 1.5, and you're very ambitious, I think.
Too much ambition breaks a man, John Uganda. But having said that, the reason why I am concerned is that with income tax going to already taking a huge dip because of companies having to declare people redundant, having to lay off people. Then you expect an income tax has been accounting for about 44%, though on a decline of our revenue, of our total revenue. Again, the two consumption taxes, VAT and excise duty, is unlikely to unless for those for basic commodities, which many of them are zero rated or tax exempt. I do not see. And also remember that import duty is a factor of incomes. So it's when companies are working or people are working that they import, they are able to buy cars. Banks have already registered that there are very few people doing asset financing. So because of all that combination, then it is likely that our revenue takeoff might only be happening towards third or fourth quarter of the financial year, which is basically 2021, as it were. And therefore, because of that, I think it is critical to do two things. One, to get into a discussion with our, with the people who have loaned us the money, with our debtors, and just be able to discuss, how can we reorganize some of the repayments and push it. I don't think we can get a waiver. So we can get a debt relief, but we can get a waiver and say, okay, fine, can we make some of these payments
at a later date?
At a later date. But remember, most of them are commercial, and therefore discussions with commercials are sometimes very, very complicated. A second one is to basically work on reducing the deficit by balancing the budget, because a huge portion of the money that is going to finance the deficit is money that government is planning, about 443 billion, to borrow locally, which then means even in a difficult economic environment, you and I will have to be competing
with the government, in borrowing the banks.
In borrowing. And of course, a bank will not give you who is not sure of a job or of business alone. It will give government, because government is almost an assured debt. So I think for me, those are two critical things. In fact, one of my desires has been to know when a supplementary budget will be tabled, but then we can balance this number.
But what is the role of organizations such as yours? So this budget has been in the public domain since the 30th of April.
Yes.
We are now already in the new financial year. Organizations such as yours and others that work on empowering the public and educating the public, what role have you played in educating the public about these kind of things, and even asking for those corrections?
Good. Thank you. I will put on record, and Shiro is aware of this, that right from the beginning of the time I talked about in February, we have been doing two things. First of all, of course, we do mobilize and train. We have trained budget facilitators in about 36 counties, and we did draw them. For instance, we prepared an 80-page memorandum to the Budget and Appropriations Committee that brought together 114 people spread across 24 counties. And the things I am speaking about are things we wrote and tabled. So, and when we read the report, it seemed to agree with some of the, you get my pain.
Yep.
That we never come to say things in public that we have not raised with the respective public officials, including the national president, when they ask for memorandums. We are writing this year, I think alone, at IBP, we have written about 8 or 10, up to almost 10 memorandums on different topics: COVID financing, the emergency regulation funds for COVID, the COVID Senate Committee, we did send them a memorandum, the Budget and Appropriation Committee, the Senate Finance and Budget Committee. So we do write these things, and we do actually put it up and say whoever wants to engage, this is the time. So on Twitter, on Facebook, and on different platforms, and we are seeing an improvement in the number of people who are starting to get interested and are starting to engage with these spaces. Of course, training at the local level is a critical piece, and we've been trying to mobilize as many people as can engage, while appreciating that it's only when we have a critical mass of people speaking about these things that then you can start now making progress as it was. So trying to do our best to train, to engage, to speak to the right policymakers on these matters, and hope that somebody will take action and do the right thing.
Yeah, Abraham, you're talking about the supplementary budget as being an opportunity to really push for a realistic budget, because right now we have a budget that is not realistic. And I have two questions. Should business, religious, civil society, should we let government off the hook in terms of this stabilization agenda? Because it's one thing for us to say, well, reduce, let's rationalize and reduce the revenue targets, let's reduce the expenditure. But are we saying that reduce it so that we can cushion businesses? Or do we buy the government narrative that business can sort itself out as long as we balance the budget? So that's my first question. And then
Yeah.
my second question is the supplementary budget process is there's a gap in the law, and this the provisions around transparency around participation are not as strong as the mainstream budget. Of course, this is a technical gap in the law. In the spirit of it, there should be public participation in all. How can we, even if we decide on certain priorities, how can we realistically hope to influence a supplementary budget where you with 140 institutions, 8 memos, which is 8 memos is maybe 4 or 5 face-to-face engagements with relevant committees. If that didn't work, how can we hope that a supplementary budget process will work? So my first question, should we let government off the hook in terms of cushioning? And 2, is the supplementary budget really going to help us?
Absolutely not. We must not let, I think we have a role, we owe it to ourselves and to our future generations to consistently engage and speak on the matters that affect us. I feel if there was a time when government requires engagement, both within Parliament and even within the National Treasury, it's at this particular time to consistently raise these things. To say that, look here, unless we move with speed, there are still businesses that are still holding on, but they need support, because it's very difficult once you've laid off people to try and get them back. So we cannot. I don't think it's an agenda that can just be let off. I think the truth of the matter is that now the stabilization agenda has moved down the river, but it's still a critical piece, and that's why I'm talking about the balancing. So the balancing here would basically be meaning that yes, we are saying we are biting the bullet and saying this is not possible. Let us be realistic. Let's rationalize. Let's create more money that we can inject into the economy. And the only way you do that is by reducing your non-discretionary expenditures. So basically, is reducing amounts that you must spend. Supplementary budget. Yeah, I mean, the engagement. The law has no provision for public participation and also the transparency of supplementary budget engagement. But by all means, it is the only mechanism that we have right now of trying to fix things, trying to balance things out, moving forward. My concern, which is also your concern, is that who is listening, and who is able to take action on this, or do we just wait until the push comes to shove, and then decisions have to be made during a fairly desperate time, and that's why I say I think the citizen petition power has a lot of space. What will it be if all of us were writing letters to the president, to the National Assembly, to
Mr. Rugo, I want to take you back a little bit.
Yes, please.
I'm actually very impressed by the activities that you've outlined that you carry out as an organization. But the question I want to ask is, to what end? What is this thing you hope to see at the end of all these activities, writing memos, training people? What is this outcome that you hope to actually see? Not achieve, see. What are these things that we can actually say, aha, we see the effects of all these processes? What is it?
So I think for me, there are two main things I want to see. First of all, that the public services that are critical for the most poor and vulnerable, and the vulnerabilities are currently increasing, are actually being achieved. So in other words, that the social contract is being honored. I think for me that's the biggest achievement. But accompanying that is that the key tenets of transparency and equity, and government accountability that are being actualized. So the second one is a process issue. The first one is a critical outcome, because what is important is that healthcare is being provided, water is being provided, security is being provided, because these are the things that we pay for as citizens, because politics across the world continue. We've lived in different countries where politics are as heated as here. But the question of critical public services is not a matter of debate. How can it be a matter of debate in this country? That we have to debate whether we have healthcare or we don't have healthcare, or whether we have water or we don't have water. We should be debating how to improve. Those are the fights in other democracies.
Indeed.
Not whether, depending on who you elect, is when you have water or you don't have water. That's not a discussion, honestly. So for me, as long as critical and every service that a Kenyan deserves is being provided, and as I've said, vulnerabilities are increasing. Many of us are one salary away from falling into the poverty group. And therefore, we need to assure for those who are already struggling that they can be provided for these services, and also assure for others who end up falling into those very, very, very spaces that they can. So for me, that's all I want to see. In all honesty.
Great. Abraham, another quick break. Let's talk about Kenya Ports Authority and this new portal called Captain Cargo. Ndu.
Right. So, what we're looking at is like we've been talking about previously, it's just been very confusing to be able to navigate through this one big giant that would be import and exports through KPA. So now I think they've taken that into consideration and made it much easier then for you to navigate in terms of information. I think the processes remain the same at the port. We're not looking at, the nitty-gritty of it. But then for us to be able to understand exactly what happens, the portal and Captain Cargo basically is there to be able to help. Understanding what happens and what you need to do, even if you're a first-time importer, if you're a first-time exporter, if you've practiced this for a very long time, and you realize, okay, I actually don't know what I should be doing. Have I lost hundreds of thousands of shillings when I shouldn't have? Have I not been applying the right knowledge in the right place? So what the portal does is basically creates easy navigation for everybody. You can be able to find, do I need to book space through an agent? Do I need an agent in the first place? And if we want to look at exports alone, for example, there's certain documents that need to be processed. How exactly does this work? So it has simplified all of this for everybody. So everybody then is able to go to the portal, find out what I need to know. And we also know that, basically what this portal has done is that it's brought information. And that information now makes it easy for you to be able to import, export, and know the general workings of the port.
And presented it visually so you
Absolutely.
can just see step by step on what needs to happen.
Step-by-step process, not confusing.
This conversation will continue. Throughout the days, we'll be telling you more about Captain Cargo. Just go to kpa.co.ke/Captain Cargo, KARGO. Good morning. 9 minutes to 8 o'clock. We're still on the line with Abraham Rugo, who is the country manager for International Budget Partnership Kenya. We have been talking about the budget. As we come to the close of this hour, Wajiro, you've got a burning question.
Yes. Abraham, what would the response to business look like? Yesterday, we were trying to do some simulations here. Has IBP managed to, think through a little bit, crunch some numbers that can give an indication? Because Kenyans feel this is a bit unrealistic, whereas others think, yes, it's doable. I don't know what would we be looking at in terms of this kind of support?
Yeah, I think we haven't done any numbers, but I will share my thoughts. One of them is a thought that I have not found any reason to dispute that was advanced by David D. about the Lifeline Fund. Of course, that would have been very, very valuable if it had been done at the time when the idea was raised 3 months ago, almost 4 months ago. Of ensuring that business do not lay off people. So basically putting in money And it's not necessarily free money. It's money on concessional. I mean, it's loans on concessional terms. At zero interest that will be paid back, but basically to make sure that businesses do not shut down. So now seeing that quite a number of businesses, apart from those in the service, a couple of critical service industries have shut down. I think then we are now looking at basically a revival of businesses, and I still believe that zero-rated loans is the way to go. I don't think anybody wants free money per se, but basically they want facilitation that will make sure.
Sorry.
Yeah, I know that.
Businesses.
You have some. Just give me.
Yeah,
No,
when you
you're
say
not
you
the
don't think that
business.
anybody wants
I have
free
a
money,
business.
honestly speaking, I think if the way it is that if people could get access to these funds that we are talking about without the burden, and if that is what can be defined as free money, I think you'd have a lot of takers when it comes to the situations which we look at ourselves now.
We
A
actually-
What I'm
lot of
saying-
takers.
We did a quick
No,
survey.
what I'm saying is that it's not free in the sense that you just use it the way you want.
Yeah.
But
Right.
you need to be somebody who has been
Responsibly.
running a credible business. You've
Yep.
been paying your taxes. Now you are not able to pay your taxes, and all you are asking for is to be able to keep your business running. So
Afloat,
you don't
yeah.
need a loan with an interest. You just need a zero-rated loan, and you will pay it back at a later point when businesses come back to normal. Because it is in the government's interest that you continue being a taxpayer if you were to look at that very selfish perspective. And that's why I'm saying I think there is still a lot of value in that. The second one is to address the challenge of a lot of businesses, especially single, sole proprietorships, are affected by the limited disposable income that they have, because they still have to pay for a lot of costs. So I think by government starting to, pushing to ensure that a lot of services that citizens have to pay for double, in terms of water, in terms of security, that these become assured services, that you don't have to incur a lot of costs, for them, that public health services are available for all, they are functioning properly, NHIF is running properly. That then has an effect in terms of how much money then you can inject into your own business, rather than paying for private services as it were.
Yeah.
But thirdly, is to break business into the different spectra and focus more on the micro, small, and medium enterprises. The tendency when it comes to bailout is to bail out the big boys. Sometimes the connection is obvious, it's political and the like, but the people who create and drive any economy is not the big boys. It's the small businesses that employ 5 people, that employ 10 people, that employ 15. So basically it's the MSME. And that is where the focus should be, if you ask me, to make sure that these people are able to resume their businesses. And of course, lastly, we cannot avoid some mass employment program. So the example of Kazi Mtaani program needs to be scaled up. The reason for that is that anytime you go into a recession, a depression, a recession, like what we are basically getting into, is that you need to find a mechanism to inject money into the economy. And over and above giving cash transfers to the orphaned and vulnerable children, you need to give people an income that give you a return for a service. So that you're able
service
to
though,
achieve.
is the service that's being earmarked for Kazim Tani the right service?
Maybe not.
Is cutting grass and collecting garbage
What is needed?
what is required?
I think there are a million options. Kenya has moved. We have a highly employed. There are many other options. Teaching children that are at home, organizing how they can be taught. There are many other options. Online kind of services. We're just getting into digitizing of the Ministry of Lands. You could employ so many people to go and type all that. Do all that clerical work. We have people who are computer literate. The options are endless. So I don't think clearing bushes
Thank you.
is the only option.
Thank you for speaking
But
to
maybe
us
if I
today,
may say one
Abraham
last
Regal.
thing.
Yes, one final comment.
one final comment. Yes, I think we owe it to ourselves to engage in the governance of this country. We cannot give up, however difficult it gets.
True.
Thank you very much.
Challenges
And
for
thank you,
organizations like yours to empower us
Sure,
by giving us the information
And
and
we
the
keep on
knowledge.
engaging.
Asante sana,
Thank you.
Abraham Rugo,
Thank you.
Country Manager, International Budget Partnership. Before you go, listen to today's proverb from CT Muga.
For the sake of peace, hard decisions must be made. This is a
Yes.
Tanzanian proverb, or saying, really.
For the sake of peace, hard decisions must be made.
Cancel unnecessary budgetary expenditure and put
For the
it
sake of
to-
peace.
Yes.
Abraham, thank you very much and
From
have a good day. Good morning. It's 8 o'clock.
It's not flowing too badly on Mombasa Road today from the SGR at Athi River, and then also coming down towards the SGR after Mlolongo, and those stoppings there, not so bad. It's raining vehicles on Thika Road today is what it looks like. Outbound, guys, is an absolute mess. And then inbound, Allsops, all the way, both highway and service lanes are still quite hectic. This is what we are seeing this morning, and it's likely to be that way for another couple of hours or so. And so Thika Road is the one that we're looking at today. Coming back to Mombasa Road, inbound at Cabanas, all the way to the Gateway Mall, is very slow for some reason. There must be something that's holding it up there. So the traffic today, epic proportions. You're going to have to be patient wherever it is that you go. And if you don't have to leave now, better stay where you are, and then we can get you moving later.
How is it at Blue Post?
Out traffic, bumper to bumper.
Why
to
is
yet
there
another
traffic bumper to bumper and there's no roadblock?
People are leaving. But people are leaving the city for some reason.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations. The Situation
2.5
Room,
minutes
witty,
after 8
political,
o'clock.
and
This is Kenya's biggest conversation, broadcasting from Nairobi to Mombasa, Nakuru, Kisumu, Malindi, Eldoret, Nyeri, worldwide on www.spicefm.co.ke, and also on our social media handle platforms, SpiceFMKE, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Join this conversation on our Instagram handle as well, SpiceFMKE, and you can call in on 0719-012-600. Today is the 7th day of the 7th month of 2020. 30 years ago today, there was the first Sabha Sabha rally. And the Sabha Sabha rally is basically where it started in that clamor and push for multipartyism, for a more open society after years of single party rule. And there were very many politicians and very many people who basically just came together and were pushing for that conversation. The notable names at that point were Kenneth Matiba, Charles Rubia, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, and others. And then there were those who were working in the background at that point, who were just, maybe younger people. They were working in the background. Among them, people like Njeru Kathangu, people like Edward Oyugi, Ngodho wa Kariuki Gathithu, George Anyona, and others. We are joined this morning by one of them. He likes to be referred to as Mtumishi Njeru Kathangu. So Njeru Kathangu is also a former MP for Onyenjes. He's currently the Ford Asili Secretary General. That's the Forum for the Restoration of Democracy. Remember, Ford, before it started splintering, was the one the Forum for the Restoration of Democracy, and the word restoration of democracy was apt at that point, because the feeling at that point was that we had basically veered off the path of democracy. I needed to come back to democracy by allowing multipartism, by allowing other voices to be heard as well, multilateralism in everything that we were doing, and more open and just society. Looking back at those 30 years since that first Sabasaba rally is what we'll be doing now. And Jero Katangu, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Asante sana
I
for
also
speaking
say
to us.
hello to all the country, because here we are commemorating a great day.
Indeed. Welcome to the Situation Room.
And thank you so much.
In the room this morning is C.T. Muga, Nduoko, and Wanjiro Gekonyo.
Very good.
Jero, let's just head back into those 30 years. At that
Yes.
point, when you were organizing this first rally, just quickly just give us what was happening. How did you come up with the idea of having this rally on this particular day? Was it a coincidence, for example, that it was on the 7th day of the 7th month?
Yeah. Well, the first thing that Kenyans must remember is Sabasaba was really a culmination of a struggle and clamor for multipartism that had started in 1969, immediately after the burning of Kenya People's Union, which had been started by Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. When Kenya, therefore, became a de facto one-party state. And then immediately after that, you see so many things happening, detentions and arrests. And again, we come up to 1982, when the same Jaramogi Oginga Odinga and George Anyona tried to form a political party called the Kenya African Socialist Alliance, and it was denied. And when it was denied, they were also detained. And immediately after that, about the second day, the KANU changed the constitution to make Kenya a de jure one-party state, making KANU the only party in this country. From then, the struggle intensified, and it saw some of us actively involved in trying to push the government to change the constitution so that Kenya could be allowed to reintroduce the plural politics. And it is because of that struggle that you find pockets of Kenyans rising up, and the then more in government arresting everybody, including what they call the Mwakenya parents of 1985, 86, 87, 88. And after that, then we came with a multi-party now movement that is started clamoring for the reintroduction of multi-party politics. It is within that program that Kenneth Matiba and Charles Rubia stood out and announced the multi-party now in 1990 after the death and murder of Ouko, and also announced the Sabasaba rally. Sabasaba here to imitate what you may call the Tanzanian TANU formation, which was done in 1954, and the party was formed and declared on the 7th of July, 1954. And that is what they were trying to tell Kenyans, that we are forming something here on the Sabasaba, and we want all of you to come and witness it. That day we were going to announce the formation of the Kenya National Congress, again taking the spirit of the African National Congress that was going to mobilize the people for their liberation.
So,
yes, sir.
What then happened on this particular day? I mean, I am imagining the first Sabasaba on Sabasaba of 1990.
Of 1990, yes.
Was it allowed to happen?
Now, this is what happened. After the date was announced towards the end of April, and having many activities to mobilize and prepare for the day, then the government decided to focus on a few people. The 5 of us and the three of them, meaning Matiba, Rubia, and Raila. But Raila just joined, I think he was in Europe, and he came in and joined the Matiba trio, and the government started following them daily or every minute, if you like, including the people they had chosen as their lawyers, led by Paul Mwite. And so when you look at the streets of Nairobi, you will see something funny happening, almost a drama, that every time Paul Mwite would walk out of his office, going anywhere, the police would follow him in cars, some of them on foot, to make sure that there were no consultations, and if there were, they were obstructed between him and Matiba. And every time Matiba went, including for his lunch, where he would walk from his office to Nairobi Hotel, that is the Lydian Towers, African, whatever they called it then. They would follow him there and try to arrest him. They did not arrest him, but teasing him. One thing that Kenneth Matiba believed is the Moi government could not arrest him because him and the Moi were very close and they were doing business together. In fact, it is said, some by joke, that it is Kenneth Matiba who was coaching Moi in English or on English in State House earlier on in the 60s because he was the permanent secretary minister of education and Moi was not quite well read. And so Matiba volunteered on request of the president then, and Moi and another were in the class, but this other one we can spare for now.
So basically, they had a good relationship. That's what Matiba believed then.
They had a very good relationship. They had very good relationship. They had businesses together. They had been friends all the time, and therefore he could not imagine that Moi would order askaris to arrest him. But dictators have no friends, my friend. So when Sabasaba was drawing near on the 4th of July, which was the America's Independence Day, they were arrested. And sometimes I wonder whether the Americans had anything to do with it, because apparently it did not bother them that these things were happening when they were celebrating the great day in their own motherland. However, after the 4th of July 1990, we were left to coordinate. And so John Janyona, Professor Edward Oyugi, Ngodo Kariuki, myself, and Kariuki Gavitu were left to coordinate and mobilize the people as they had been set up in Mombasa, Kisumu, Nakuru, the central Kenya towns of Murang'a, Nyeri, etc., so that they could attend the party. We had several buses, which some of them hired, others donated by people to bring the people to witness the launch of Kenya National Congress on the 7th.
Was it launched?
And, no, it was not launched. Something was stopped, and this is what happened. That that day, at about 11 o'clock, Kariuki Gavitu was to start a football match between two young groups at Kamukunji. George Anyona and myself were to enter the grounds at about midday, and then others would follow. In the meantime, Ngodo Kariuki and Professor Oyugi were coordinating those that were coming and entering the city, and therefore things had been done. But unfortunately, when we went into the ground at about 12 midday, then a man called Cheriot, I think, was an OCPD from Buruburu, and a few others noticed us. And they came, obstructed us, and we thought it was not going to create a scuffle, because if we created a scuffle, then we would be stopped very early. We thinned out and went back to the coordinating office, which was in Musa House. Now, Musa House is at the roundabout of Landhays Road, overlooking the mosque at Kamukunji, or, if you like, at the end of Haile Selassie Avenue.
Yeah.
That one, at the third floor. That is where the activities were being conducted. But immediately we left the place, then the police came into the compound and started fighting. But at that point, some of the buses from central Kenya, Mombasa and Kisumu, had arrived at Machakos bus station. And so there were a lot of people getting into Kamukunji, and very many other people followed them, and they were singing songs. So they really attracted, and it became a confrontation between the police and these fellows attending, which meant that the fight on Kamukunji grounds had started. And so we transformed our activities, or we changed tact. Instead now of announcing on going to Kamukunji or forcing ourselves into Kamukunji, then we decided the best thing would be to coordinate the cities and the towns where demonstrations had been arranged. And so taking the Nakuru Highway, Nairobi-Nakuru Highway, taking the Nairobi-Thika Highway, taking the Nairobi-Mombasa Highway, and so forth, and all these towns there. Then activities started at 1 o'clock. And
Jerry,
then Kenya...
as I hear you recount all of this, it could be that this happened yesterday. It happened 30 years ago. And you remember all of this as if it were yesterday.
Because I was there.
Absolutely. Now,
Yes.
there was a reason why all of this came about. And it was very interesting because a few seconds ago you said that you were then able to coordinate across the country because there were other people who were like-minded and were ready to go forward to achieve the change for which you wanted.
Correct.
As you look at it now in 2020 and you look back and as we celebrate this day, do you believe that which you wanted to see come about was achieved?
The Kenyan struggle, my sister, for all the time you have known from 1950s to now, has always been shortchanged. Shortchanged somehow because the powers involved have been instructed, taught, and coached about how to do this. And if you allow me, I'll just give two statements about 1950s and 60s. When the British decided to give Kenya space for democracy, they also decided that the people that were going to do that were not the freedom fighters in the forests and those that had been detained and imprisoned. Instead, what they did was to delay releases from detentions and prisons, and they put in place all the children and the chiefs to be in charge, the children of chiefs and their fathers to be in charge of the program. First, the program was the demarcation of land. The chiefs and the DOs became in charge. And the next one is the running of government. The bureaucracy created was handed by those children of chiefs who, throughout the Mau Mau's time, were the enemy of the people. So by the time the people were coming from detentions and prisons and the forests, they found that structure already in place. The people from the forests and the detentions had promised that because the Africans were taking government, they would not disrupt it, because they believed that the Africans could in fact allow for what they were fighting for. It never happened. Then Kenyatta became one of the most vicious people against the freedom fighter. When it came to Moi, and Moi detained a lot of people who were seeking multi-party politics. When it came to him, then he decided while we were in detentions and in prisons that he was going to introduce multipartyism. What is it that he did? Just like they had done in 1960-61, they brought in people, including special branch officers to form political parties. So they allowed one Odinga to form Ford. All the others were formed by suspicious characters. Some of them who were informers, some of them that were special branch, and very close umbilical cord friends of Daniel Moi. So they took all the political party names, including Socialist Party, I don't know what have you, all those. So the first 15 political parties were owned by people. By the time we were released from detentions and prisons, those political parties were already in place. And any of us proposing or suggesting that we form a political party of our own, the people out there had already been poisoned. What we fought for has come, and therefore we cannot allow for another one. And if you do, then we will reject it. So that is what happened. What is it that happened then when Moi was leaving? Something else very interesting. And you are going to see it replayed in this country. He decided that the only character that was going to be the person to take over from him was an amateur. A person that would not be able to understand a political statement, who did not understand the philosophies, who did not even understand history, but was going to be coached so that he became a beautiful creature of Daniel Moi, and that is our President Uhuru Kenyatta, and he knows it. He met me in Parliament. He met me in Parliament when McTaw had been asked to step down. He was nominated to take that place, and so there he was, timid, shy, and so he is our president. What is it that he is going to do? Simply to make sure that he protects that which had been achieved by the system from 1961 to Moi's day. And he has done it very well. And he has done it very well. But you remember that there is a Kipake state. Now, people are talking about the dynasties, friends, dynasties in Kenya. We don't have very many dynasties. It is Kenyatta dynasty ruling this country. And the only thing that is different from them is that from 1948 to this day, the Odinga family, and Odingas have been very close friends of mine, but reflecting back, you can actually see that from 1948 to this day, that family is the one that has provided the democratic value of opposition, so that international communities would always say that Kenya is a democracy because there is a government ruling, and that government is the Kenyatta value and formation, and the opposition is the Odinga value. So what do we mean here? Simply this, that we cannot achieve it with such hypocritical programs happening here. And our country has been created to be a hungry country where no food is. Two, it has been created to be a poor country so that the people have been promoted and encouraged to drink. So they are hungry, they are poor, they are drunk, and they are rude very easily.
Let me take you back to that time. What do you say? Political parties were formed when a number of you were in detention, but Ford was allowed to go into registration.
Because of their program.
So it became a huge movement, Ford. Matiba came back from abroad where he was undergoing treatment, and all of you were in Ford. When we look back at that juggernaut of a political party and the immediate splinter, what made it start breaking apart?
This way. Remember, like what I have said, that a lot of people came in who were not serious. When Ford was formed, very many people from Kanu got into Ford. Some of them not serious at all, led by a Kanu Secretary General called Peter Oro Aringo. And when they came there, after about 1 or 2 months, they started complaining again and running back to where they had come from, save for a few people. And that scared a lot of Kenyans. In the meantime, there is a group of Kenyans within the movement that call themselves the Young Turks. And the Young Turks appeared like they were preparing themselves to take over, which is correct anyway, because ambition is correct. And unfortunately, that when they were going to take over, they wanted to change that which had been done by the 6 elders or the 9 elders so that it fits them. And one of the things they proposed was this, that we were not going to conduct presidential nominations from the grassroots or at the grassroots. We were going to form college sittings where a few delegates from the country would come in to decide who the presidential candidate should be. And this was motivated by the fact that because Kennedy Matiba was coming in now from London, they thought that he would have a greater following that would take away a few votes from Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. And Kennedy Matiba was not coming to be president. He was coming to join Ford, but to be a presidential candidate. So, because of that understanding and that is stand by the Young Turks within Ford, then at one point, led by Martin Shikuku and John Ndenge, Herman Bamaris and others in Kitui, they said, no, we cannot change the Ford constitution because we would like that nominations are carried at grassroots, that is at sublocation level. And that really is what is played for. And there was such tug of war about that then the Jaramogi group decided to stay in what they call the Ajib House, and myself, Peter Nyang and Oyugi had been asked, and Ngoto Karaoke had been asked to open a secretariat at the Modidi House, so which had been donated by Jim Nambaru. And when we did that, assisted by Meko Kenya, when we did that, then Matiba arrived and he decided that was going to be where he would sit. And Jaramogi said that he would sit in Ajib House. And the two of them quarreled about that, and the split happened on a very flimsy ground, but it did.
Looking
and
back,
everybody appeared to celebrate.
Looking back, Njeru, from that point, with hindsight, was that a good move to go ahead up to a point of breaking up such a huge movement that you had?
You see, it was very bad to split Ford, but it became inevitable because of the forces involved. In fact, when I look back myself, I still see the hand of Moi in it, because later on, Martin Shikuku, my very good friend, said, wamekula kaugari, State House na Moi, and they are okay, right? While on the other side, 1 year later, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga was saying, Moi ni kama twiga, he's like a giraffe, and he sees very far, and therefore, let us go back to him and be able to make one Kenya. Now, those two characters are the ones that created the division. And these are the two people that are saying, Kumbe, they have been cohabiting with Moi, and therefore the country went back to where we were in 1960.
It doesn't sound to me like it was an ideological difference. It sounds like it was an ego difference.
There was no ideology in Ford. Everybody was there. If you talk about ideologies, we have about 6 ideologies in the world, and there is none that was at play. Nobody was talking about land. Nobody was talking about the poor. Nobody was talking about the environment. We were simply saying, change
Moi out.
The leadership. Moi aende. So akukuwa na hii mambo ya ati filosofia yetu ni fulani. There was really nothing like that. Because Shikuku stood for something, my friend Oginga stood for something, Kenneth Matiba was standing for creating riches, I don't know, all these things. So there was nothing ideological.
So,
nevertheless, my sister, before you ask the question, that in fact is what the Kenyans are supposed to decipher. What is it that we follow in political parties? What is it that we follow in individuals? In what do they believe in? ama ni kutuchanganya tu kama karanga ule ya Tanzania?
Yeah, so Mtumishi, I have so many questions, but
Ask all of them.
I'll only ask one because of
Yeah.
time.
Yes.
You're talking about change. Moi must go as this unifying call or for that time. You can see where we are, and I think you've given us a very good backdrop to understand the mindset and the interests of Uhuru Kenyatta vis-a-vis the Kenyatta dynasty. What is our rallying call now that we can use to get Kenyans on board? Because it seems that things are very, very dark. We've lost a lot
They are
of ground,
very dark,
and people
very good.
don't seem able to see as clearly as people could see that time across the board. What could be the rallying call now that can bring people across from various ideology, religious, business?
Yeah, thank you very much. Personally, what I see, and by the way, let me tell you, I am slightly happy about what I see. And the reason why I say I'm slightly happy is because for all those 30 and more years, we always told the people the kind of leaders they should choose. And instead of listening to us, some of them have called us, Vinyangarika. I don't know what Vinyangarika means, but that is what they call us. Some of them actually throw stones at us because they have been told so. But now they are suffering without bitterness. Right? And that, according to me, that suffering is what mobilizes them to form some little quorum that they can be able to push what I am now calling change for posterity. If there is going to be any rallying call, according to me, there cannot be anything else than fighting for posterity, because everybody fought for his own and it has not produced any good result. We can only fight so that the future generations can benefit from what we leave behind now. And so what I am saying is that we must fight for change for posterity. That time it was Moi must go. Now it must be for posterity.
Mtumishi Njeru Kathangu, just stay on the line for a bit. We take a look at traffic and then we continue with this conversation. You're giving us very interesting insights. Today being a very important day, the 7th day of the 7th month of the year is Sabasaba. We are looking back 30 years of the Sabasaba movement, what you started those 30 years ago, giving us the context of what was happening. And now we are looking at leadership. When we come back out of this break, Mtumishi, we'll talk about what we have gained and what we've lost in those 30 years.
Yes, thank you very much.
Stay on the line. On the line is Mtumishi Njeru Kathangu. He's a former member of parliament for Runyenjes. He's also the current Secretary General for Dasili. He was one of the main organizers of the first Sabasaba rally, among the people who are really leading the push and the clamor for multipartyism in the early 90s and the late 80s. Good morning. This is a Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation at 8:30.
Then it looks so absolutely crazy on Thika Road today. It's likely to be there for a couple of hours. Outbound traffic still a menace. Everybody leaving the city on that point, but hopefully that will ease up. Inbound traffic needs to be the one that we look at a little bit more now, because quite a lot coming into the CBD. Right around the Pangani underpass, it's going to be held up for a while there. It's all the way from today. The traffic is all the way from the Garden City Mall all the way to Guru Nanak. So guys, here, patience is necessary. We'll get to town eventually. In the CBD, we do have a little bit of a hold up. Uhuru Highway is clogged just like it was yesterday, all the way from the Nyayo Shedam roundabout all the way through to Westlands today. So continuing in true form, fine fashion, everybody's out. Now that things have been opened up, everybody is at least looking for business within the city. All right, we'll tell you if it gets any worse. If anything that you need to know about or be cautious about, we'll let you know. Spice of MKE, however, let us know what you see as well.
26 to 9, it's a situation in Kenya's biggest conversation. Still having the conversation with Njeru Katangu, Mtumishi Njeru Katangu, Ford Asili Secretary General, former MP for Runyenjes, and a man who was among those who led the first Sabasaba rallies. As we went into the break, Mtumishi, you said, you know, one of the things that now we need to be focusing on is change for posterity.
Yes.
And this change for posterity is with a realization that all that clamor and all the change that we were pushing for, it was clouded by personal ambition.
Yes.
Even by the very many people who were in the leading lights of the change, the push for multipartyism.
Yes.
So what is the shape and form of this new leader who's going to come and take us to this new posterity without the kind of ambitions that marred the first 30 years?
Yes. Now, remember that every generation is 30 years split into 10, 10, 10. A generation has 3 decades.
Mm-hmm.
And in this generation, from Moi time to now, that generation has really been deprived and denied of information, of national values, and even of family values. And one of the biggest problems that we have in Kenya today is that particular generation does not see anything but the self-needs. They are the ones that are looking for shortcuts. They believe they can be rich without handwork. They actually believe they can be without an education. Some of them have been sent to universities, and those universities, they look for people to write their theses and answers and what have you. What is happening here is that the Moi regime deflocked people of determination and commitment, which means that as we are today, Kenyans are going to be seeking a liberator to liberate them. Kenyans are going to be looking for a savior. But where does the savior come from when they cannot see one themselves? You can only hope that there is going to be an emerging figure, a character of commitment and somebody who loves people, that can be able to offer something at least to release the people here and resuscitate their lives.
Mr. Katangu, are you saying that the current crop of leaders do not represent the form and shape of such a leader?
I don't see them. I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
Remember this. I have personally worked with all of them.
Yep.
All, and I say all, and they are my witnesses. And I can tell you that there has been a lot of time wasting looking for money and property that none of them has been able to sit and concentrate to look at what the state and society requires, not for 5 years, but for 100 or 200 years. The reason why Kenya lags behind, and it is the most primitive country politically in Africa, is that from the time that we walked out,
you've got to be fair with us.
Yes, let me. You are asking me questions.
Please explain our primitivity.
Let me give my statement. You are viewers. You can give viewers at an appropriate time. Now the question is mine. That we have got one of the most backward political societies in this Africa that has come from a freedom war, that has seen the democratic struggle, whose leaders have been detained and eliminated by way of assassinations, and it does not tickle this society that something must be done, that we must look for an appropriate character. Their social institutions have been diluted to give 0 programs, where the education program alone changes every 10 years, making the society a society that cannot agree in anything, not even in research, because each one of us has got a different approach. What kind of society is this? Listen, the kind of person that you must look for, and you have got the obligation to do it. Don't run away. You have got the obligation to do it, because without a good political leader, there is nothing that will work for you. You have only been left with about 4 families which constitute about 30,000 people, and those are the owners of property, the owners of land, and the owners of every institution. They guide you like blind people.
Wow. You know, now we are wondering how to come back at that one.
You had better come back.
Yes, can I?
You had better come back.
I want to ask this question.
Ask it.
Mr. Kalangu, you sound to me like a diehard idealist.
No, it's because I live in this country and I am a witness to it.
So
Where
are you
people-
saying that even as a politician, you do not believe in idealism? You know, I say this because I think idealism is positive. I don't think it's negative.
I believe in idealism. I know what ideas are, and I know the people who get stuck on ideas. That is not Jero Kathangu. If I get stuck on ideas, I will not be talking with you. Many of our people are not around. That is why maybe you called me, because others are not there. I am saying this, and I am not a young boy also, so I know from where we've come, and I know where I am. Where the country we are talking about, Kenya, has got about 4 million people in Nairobi, and only about 850,000 can be able to earn something. All the others are the independent.
Yeah.
And it does not worry you. Does it worry the politician?
No.
Is it okay for us to say that Kenya is one of the main economic powerhouses, economic hubs, and you have got about 3.2 million dependents on 800 in the capital city?
Thank you.
And you say I'm an idealist.
How exactly do you arrive at these figures, Mheshimiwa?
How would you not arrive to it? Right now we are in a corona system.
Yes, we
Right?
are.
The corona period has witnessed the Kenyans saying, open it up, we go home. We cannot be able to eat, we cannot be able to pay rent, we cannot be able to have our children around here because they are crying all over. Can you allow us to go home? What is it that the government did? They even did not listen to that. Open up so that the people can go home, and after they've gone home, close it. Those that cannot go, offer them transport. Don't create a slaughterhouse in your city. And they didn't.
Yeah, in fact, I think
Politicians, the leaders need to think. It's not to watch people. We are not to feed your show.
I think you're provoking us because we have become accustomed to injustice. We have rationalized and we expect it, and we actually accept it. 82.3 of employment in Kenya is in the informal sector. That's a reality. And we have, and like you say, contrasted to that, we are an economic powerhouse and economic hub on the continent. But and we are a lower middle income country, but really we are not. And we have accepted this. So I think I fully agree with you. And just yesterday we were talking about, Wandia Njoya has been talking about our education system and how it has removed the ability for Kenyans to be critical, politically aware,
critical thinkers.
and to be critical thinkers. And I'll give a personal testimony to this. Our daughter is at the African Leadership Academy in South Africa. She got herself a scholarship, and it's a school that is promoting young people to think about solutions for their country. And in fact, you study there, you have to then come and work in Africa. They don't train you and then you go and take your knowledge out there. And as Kenyans, we can see the difference between our Kenyan students and the South African students and the Nigerian students in terms of political awareness and appreciation, and even the depth of understanding of the issues, being able to interpret things politically. And these are the students who are already directed towards political understanding, but when you put them with their peers, you can see the deficit. in terms
Yes,
of our
yes.
education system. So I
On the other,
completely
yes.
agree with you. And our students are in the private, coming from a private background, more so
Yes.
the public school where kids are being taught by many teachers with a very shallow curriculum, no time for developing that critical thoughts. And as parents, we are not teaching it. So I completely agree. Whatever our situation is not sustainable. But I don't know whether we can afford to wait for this Messiah, who you're saying isn't even there. We are very excited about some of the candidates who have put their names forward. But we can't you can't surely be telling us, sit and wait.
But Wanjiru, how then do Kenyans like your daughter manage with our system, which, as you say, is moribund, dead, or disabled, still manage to capture a position that is internationally competed for? And apart from that, there are many other Kenyans who also manage to get scholarships in other universities abroad and proceed to excel there with this dead system. How do they manage to do that?
People in those other systems will say
There
they
is-
are
there
really
is something-
impressed
there is
by the quality.
CT,
No, it's okay.
education is
It's okay.
not about knowledge. Kenyans have a
Yeah.
lot of knowledge. Anywhere you go, you'll be told Kenyans have knowledge. Education is about criticality and ability to bring solutions, and Kenyans are falling short.
Wanjiru,
That's
the
point.
system of education in the universities abroad are very stimulus response based, which means you have to think. You don't regurgitate what you've absorbed or what you've internalized.
Why are you making an assumption that abroad has better education
May-
than ours?
Oh,
Look
no,
at look
but
at
it's
look
you
at
who has made that assumption.
no,
All
no,
I
no,
have
no,
said.
no,
You've just
no.
said that.
I did not say abroad is better than ours, because we may have modeled systems that cannot
Wanjiru,
save our
it's you who's bringing the concept of
May-
better
may I
here.
come in?
All I'm saying.
the better I said was across
Let
Africa.
Mtumishi Njeru Kathangu come
May I-
in.
may I-
your time.
may I come
Please
in
come in,
for
sir.
Please.
Yes.
second? You know, I don't think that my sister out there is talking about how Kenyan education is so backward and so forth. But there is something she is saying, that when you are going to be looking at your country politically, Kenyans have been denied it because from the time that Moi came in 1978, he changed the approach to political education and brought the government education, meaning that in the universities and all schools, what you will be taught is about government. What is government? Government is a small little thing within a state. When we talk about political science, we look at the state and the society. When you are talking about the government, you are talking about, I think, the fourth item of state, meaning that we have denied you about three things. That itself simply means when you go and sit with others, as they talk about the state, you'll be mumbling something about government, and you cannot fit in. You know, and that is what she is saying. Now, when it comes to these other subjects, for example, when you talk about IT has attracted almost all the young people in Kenya. They actually don't think there is anything else that should be learned other than IT. So if you excelled in IT in Kenya and you went to South Africa, to Germany, to Britain, to America, to whatever place, you will tick because you have done it committedly as yourself, not because the system so promoted it. It's because the young character has been attracted to that IT so much that he has gone out looking for facts and ideas about success on that line.
Are you saying that
So
that
you-
system is still being perpetuated in our education system?
It's not perpetuated. I mean, nobody is working to have Kenya excel educationally. Who is doing that? And most of the papers that you mark are not even written by those students. They are written by their lecturers, and they pay.
And yet, despite this, Kenya has developed a reputation as being the hub for ensuring that people who do not wish to write their own papers, people who do not wish to take the time to study and research for their own thesis, they come to Kenyans to do precisely that. And these are people who've learned in this same system.
Kenya is the one that is spreading that, and which is perpetuated not by the Kenyan education structure, but by the lecturers. It is the lecturers in the Kenyan universities who have been making money writing papers for others. And those others, if you ask any of them any question about what their papers contain, at least to go slightly deeper than the sentence or the statement, they will not do it.
So if we look
Because
at
they don't know.
all of this, I mean, from what set the premise for this where this debate that we are currently in is that there's a leadership or there's a lack of proper governance and leadership in this country. And you said that you're looking at the current crop of leaders and you can't see anybody who's going to take Kenya over this to the promised land, as it were. All right.
When you look for a leader, Wanjiru, I've heard you called Wanjiru.
It's not Wanjiru. The Wanjiru is the other one.
This is
not
The other one is called Ndu.
So my
Okay,
question
carry
here,
on,
because
carry on.
if conversations then have to be crafted towards solutions, and then if we're saying now that if the current crop, you're saying that there really is no, you can't see anybody. What then needs to be done? Because if I can just finish, Jerry, is that if you looked at what you saw was missing, what you felt was going to bring the attention of people was then a protest that reverberated through the entire country. And that is what brought some kind of change. I am not the one to advocate for violence or anything like that, but for me to see that there's any kind of change, it has to be at that level, at that protest level, to say that if what we are seeing is not working, how are you going to get people to take to pay attention and to do something about it?
Yes, I think there are basically three ways that you can be able to get a good leader. When you wait for people to announce their intentions, sometimes you get the wrong person, because the wrong person, from the time that Parliament became a good paymaster, the people have become attracted to the salary and the allowance. Number two, if you elected those people after they have made their allowances or they have repaid themselves the campaign sweat, then they forget everything else that they have been doing other than to accumulate. In the villages, and I repeat, the villages know their children, they know their leaders, they know their shining stars, they know the people that represent them in cooperative movements beautifully. They know the people that have run the school committee programs beautifully. They know. But let me tell you, most of the good leaders from the villages or from our communities fear to come to the center of political work because Kenyans have dismissed politics as one, evil,
Dirty.
and number three, people that are simply criminals. They look at politicians as murderers, as rapists, as thieves, and that does not motivate a good heart and good soul. It doesn't.
So
Because
are you saying that the
people say, sir, that if I go and take a political leadership slot, I'll be dismissed as a thief, and I don't want to mess my name.
The people in the villages, when they're electing their leaders, are they not having a conversation with the people that they would like to see leading them in higher levels of government in those political positions? Because you're saying these are the same people who elect the cattle dip chairman. They're the same ones who elect the school boards.
Yes. So, those that elect in the school boards and the cattle dips do not pay at all. But those people that are elected into the local governments and the MPs must pay. And the people don't vote until they are paid. They say this: mimi sipeani kura yangu mpaka nilipwe, sababu hata akienda naenda kutafutia bibi yake na watoto.
Right. So it sounds to me, Njeru.
What kind of a leader are you going to get when he has paid you?
It sounds to me, Njeru, that this villager then is the one that needs to have a moment of reawakening. So that they
Well-
see a political leader as an extension of the cattle dip chairman, as an extension of the local cooperative movement leader, as an extension of every other leader in the local community.
That is going to be so, but even the other thing that must be done is to make sure that the laws in this country do not favor the rich and the corrupt. Remember that when you are going to look at your laws, and I would like you to take your own that controls your media. If you look at that law and you go and look at the Constitution, the two of them do not tally some place, and that is the biggest problem that our country has, that anybody using our laws anasema mimi natumia sheria, lakini ile sheria anatumia is a sheria against the people, right? And that is the sheria that we must focus on. How does our law protect and safeguard the aspirations of the people, whether it is about leadership, whether it is about riches and economics and finances, whether it is about agriculture and what, how does it save them? If you look at your constitution and you look at the laws, you will see the lacunas created. And it is those lacunas that the leaders use to manipulate the mind of the citizen.
You know,
so it's
Mr.
really
Galangu,
not about the village. It's not about the village. And bro, let me tell you that if you look at the 5 years or whatever years that we were in parliament, you look at the motions and the bills that we passed in parliament, there is something you are going to see. And we did things that meant even Kanu itself to be diluted in the static thinking that...
You know, that is actually absolutely true.
There,
But
so,
I want to take you
when we
back
went there-
to the issue of education, Mr. Kalangu. Right
Yes,
now,
but there
the
is
biggest...
something I wanted to say,
Yes,
so that I don't forget,
Yes.
that the CDF that you are talking about in Kenya, we introduced it ourselves in the year 2001.
yes, you did.
That the thing that you talk about, the HIV and AIDS program, which Moi had refused to recognize from 1984, you know, we introduced it ourselves as a program. When you look at the roads board, we introduced it. And because some of the Kanu people accepted to agree with us, and when I say as, I'm talking about Orengo, Katango, Mukisa Kitui, and Karaoke Karoe, Muriuki Karoe, when they decided to agree with us, Moi sacked them, led by Andrew Kipton. You know, and so a representative of the people wants to look at the laws, which law is going to benefit these people,
The people.
you know, and work out a program, create business in the house to make sure that that law is either changed or introduce another one.
Mr. Kalangu,
Come to education here.
our biggest foreign exchange earner in this country are called remittances.
Yes.
And you cannot have remittances unless you have a powerful human resource base, meaning people are educated to the point where they can work abroad and they can send money back into the country.
Yes.
And many of
Oh,
them
may
are products of this same educational
in the
system.
country.
Yes.
Points made.
Oh, you want me to comment about it? I will tell you. I have lived in Britain. I have lived in Germany. I have lived in Italy. I know a bit of Paris and Brussels. And I have stayed in India for 3 months every year for about 6 years. Let me tell you, the people you are trying to be so proud about, I know them. That people in Europe have achieved what you call the old age, almost unproductive. And they are looking for labor, not from Kenya, from across the world. So that you will find a lot of Caribbeans in Europe. You find Africa is there. What kind of jobs do they perform? The very first one is looking after the old people. And some of those old people are looked after by people who came from Kenya as degree holders. Those are the people that are...
I'm
listen,
afraid
sir.
I'm afraid I've got to have to cut you short because we're coming to the top of the hour.
You may, but there is that thing you asked is so important. The remittances are not sent here by people that are in charge of programs in the United States. They are sent here by people who have gone out there and are serving as soldiers because they could not fit in here. They go there, they are conscripted into the armed forces, they are sent to Iraq and what have you, blah, 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 blah. They are actually the slave pharaohs for the United States. Those are the people that are sending the money here. Don't be proud about it. Because when you are proud about it, then it means that we are actually demeaning our capacities and our dignity.
Debatable, sir, but let's have that debate another day.
I'm with you.
Another day. Jero Kathangu, thank you very much for speaking to us, and thank you for giving us the context of today being a very important day, Sabasaba. You have a program that you've lined up today. Just tell us about it. You're going to visit the home of...
I'm going to be visiting Godwa Kariu to say hello to him at 11 o'clock.
All right.
And he is very near you people because I know you are on Mombasa Road. I am going to, immediately after this, I will go to see Ngodo, say hello to him, remember our prison days kidogo, and I come back and rest before the corona time comes.
Asante sana. You have a good day and say hello.
Thank you so much, Jero.
Thank you very much, sir.
You people are great people. You people are great people. Please continue provoking the thought and ideas of Kenyans because that is the debate. Let us not just follow, but talk.
Asante sana.
It's 9 o'clock.
All right. What may have changed so far? Not much. Thika Road is actually still very, very crazy. Let's see. In Westlands, James Gishuru from Mudhangari Police Station, traffic, everybody's turning around for some reason. Something amiss up ahead, as it were. We'll find out what that may be, but that means that traffic is affected all the way down then on Waiaki Way because it joins with what is going on. Traffic into Westlands via Riverside also at a standstill. It seems that wherever we look today, it's absolutely crazy. Limuru Road from all the way down from the village market, then crossing down over towards the Aga Khan Hospital and then into the city centre. That is a bumper to bumper. So let's say everywhere you look, it's bumper to bumper. We're smack dab in the middle of traffic hour right now. Somewhere where you're stuck, or even better yet, a way that you can find out of traffic. Let us know. Spice FMKE. That's how you can reach us on Twitter. Get away from this Tuesday morning craziness.
This is The Situation Room, the home of hard-hitting political commentary and penetrating insights about the state of the nation. This is a talk radio experience like no other. The Situation Room, a place for hard truths, debates, and elevated conversations.
It's 2.5
The
minutes after 9
Room,
o'clock.
witty,
Okay, guys,
political, engaging, deep, controversial. In the room, we have C.T. Muga, researcher,
For the
academic.
sake of peace, hard decisions must be made.
Okay. Now, Uhuru amefungua. You know, that was basically the language yesterday. Amefungua. And kufungua here is the measures that were relaxed yesterday by the government. And these are in terms of the cessation of movement. These are in terms of allowing people to leave the city center, travel to and out of Nairobi, Mombasa, and Mandera was allowed. The 9 p.m. to 4 a.m. curfew is still extended for a further 30 days. People who will be allowed to go into church now, yes, places of worship have also been allowed to resume operations with only 100 people allowed in a place of worship for only 1 hour, and then there's also an age limit. It's between 13 and 53.
Yeah.
Those below 13, those above 53. Now I wonder.
58.
58. I wonder whether
the pastors.
the preacher, including the preachers.
Including the preachers, of course.
They didn't specify, but they
Unlimited
said they just
limits.
said 58. So they didn't say whether you're a pastor, whether you're a congregant. 58. Period. That's where you
Okay.
fall.
It'll be interesting for
Okay.
some.
Okay. So those ones are also not allowed to travel. Mandatory health certification for PSVs from Nairobi, Mombasa, and Mandera. Now, that is another issue that may raise some questions. When you talk about health certification, are you talking about testing them for COVID-19 and giving them COVID-19 certification like you've done with restaurant workers? What does that mean exactly? Passenger flights are going to resume from the 15th of July, and there's already the jokes going around that there are some parts of the country that will not have PSVs, buses and matatus crisscrossing from Nairobi to go to areas, for example, CT's neighborhood. They're waiting for 15th
Sorry?
so that they can fly down to
That place.
your neighbor. Your
The city.
I'm sure your neighbor is not waiting to go to Machako's bus stop to.
We don't have those problems.
You're waiting for the 15th.
We have other
Say it.
problems,
The other
but not
say it.
those.
not this
Hey.
one.
Say it. It is what it is.
International flights to resume from August the 1st. Political meetings are still restricted, of course, who we're talking about. Restrictions on weddings and funeral attendance extended by a further 30 days. So still, wedding industry is still affected. Okay. Bars and other social places to remain closed, especially those that operate in the night hours. And these are the measures that were announced by the president. So, just like Njeru Kathango was saying, and everybody who would comment about this is saying, it's basically allowing the people in Nairobi who are feeling really, really affected by COVID-19 an opportunity to seek refuge in Shags. Everything else is an addendum.
It also transfers the burden of disease to the counties.
From-
Hence the statement the president made
Yeah.
prior on counties, be ready. And he said it again yesterday as he made the statement. It's the reality.
I think it was an excellent decision, personally.
Why?
County governments, we forget the word government when we refer to counties. We just say counties. They are governments. And they must do what governments are supposed to do. The whole point of devolution was precisely that. So that you have entities that can be localized and that can take over the functions that were focused on a centralized government. Now, we still have leaders within, because this is not county. We have leaders within those counties who still have this school person mentality where they feel the national government must keep doing things for them. So the thing that they do consistently is to whine and gripe about them not having received money and never really giving a good account of what they have done with the money that they have received. You know, these monies that the counties receive are in the billions. How many cities are those? You know, these figures confuse me. Because trillion now I can't even fathom. My brain doesn't have the
Billion has
capacity
9
to figure it
zeros.
out.
9.
Okay? Billion, I'm slowly getting the
9
million.
digits or 9 zeros?
9 zeros.
Yes, see, million I understood.
9 zeros.
Now, million.
So
in
10
this-
digits.
It's like when someone
Assuming
talks
it's a
of
single
millions
billion.
nowadays, it's pittance. And I'm thinking, a million shillings. Pittance, how? So, if you are then given the mandate to look after your people, because remember, when I travel, I am not going to go to somebody else's county. I'm going back to my county.
Yeah.
Okay? Let that county administration and government look after its people, because many of them have done a terrible job of looking after their people.
So the way COVID exposed the national government and its ill preparedness and its ill response to the plight of its people, it's basically now going to expose county governments. Same level.
Now
Yes,
it would be
democracy.
the national government pointing to the county government and saying, it's your turn. Because that is exactly what is
And being
going to
specific
happen
and
now.
saying, we've given you this amount of money for this.
Yep.
What have you done with
What have
it?
you done
And the
with it?
people also questioning and saying, all right, so this is what you've been doing as a county government. These are the programs that you've even budgeted for in this year. So let's see how that program, how that budget is going to be aligned to addressing to our immediate needs, which is recovering from COVID-19.
In fact, I agree City, with what you're saying, that counties need to take responsibility, and I think that's the consensus in the room. And the counties where governors have invested in health, as we heard yesterday, will fare better because they have the infrastructure. They've got the personnel, they've got the infrastructure that they can then ramp up, and they have the systems with which to respond. Counties that have not been paying attention to health, even if they get this additional allocation and have been trying to respond, will struggle because, you don't have the system in place. So we are likely to see that differential. And the main thing will be to look at which are the high areas of concern and what's their response likely to be like. So yes, counties need to, come into this conversation, and they need to rise to the occasion. In terms of health and also in terms of livelihoods. Like I mentioned some time back, I believe it's Nyandarua County that it's Nyandarua County that enacted a bill for the protection of micro enterprises. And this bill was to put aside money to assist, to get a COVID response to assist those in informal sector.
I think Nanyuki as well, when you spoke to the governor, Laikipia.
So it was Laikipia. So, and they did this off the bat. I think they had enacted the bill by end of April. So this is what, if you look at Kitui, you had also Machakos, they began immediately manufacturing the masks, right? So yes, counties need to rise to the occasion. It is their responsibility. However, the conversation in Kenya about county governments is never complete without the national. Because of, under Article 6(2), we have interdependent government. So there are those roles that national government must play for counties to play their role. In the COVID response, and in terms of what you're talking about, the billions of shillings, counties last year got 316 billion out of I think it was a 2.7 trillion budget. So this gives you an idea. Counties have about, there's a list of functions in the Constitution. There are two schedules. One is with the national government, one is with the county government. Counties have water, they have health, they've got agriculture, public participation.
It's actually very clear.
Right. So they have functions. Out of the 2.7 trillion budget of last year, they got 316 B from the national government, shareable revenue. Out of the 2.8 trillion proposed this year, they're still getting 316 B. It's been capped. So let's be careful when we say, well, they're getting lots of money. Let me finish. The other point is, and the bone of contention has been how the amount has been a point of contention and how the money is then transferred. As we sit, out of the previous financial year, 58 billion owed to counties has not been transferred. So counties have, first of all, they don't have enough money. You had
58 billion in total.
58 billion out of the 316 B.
So,
right?
The rest they got.
Yeah,
but the bulk of it they've already received.
No.
But so each has not received about $1 billion or so.
Now,
a little bit.
First of all, it's unconstitutional.
All right.
But the other thing is, when you're talking about, if national government needs 2.8 trillion to enable the budget, all service delivery functions except health except education except actually secondary and primary tertiary education are at the county level. Counties are getting 316 B. So already the quantum is a problem. And that's why you heard what Governor Mutua told us yesterday. He looked at the money, he said it's not enough. So he made a decision. He's going to invest in health as the basic enabler. So do not expect counties to improve the quality of services from what was there before.
I'm sorry, Wanjiru.
Let me finish.
But here, no. Sorry. Here, you know what? I always say it is okay because you're going to set a premise.
Allow
to,
me to
we're going
finish
to you're
making
going to,
my
you're going
point.
to set
Kindly
up, you're going
allow
to set
me
up,
to finish making my
You're
point.
going to set a
Now,
premise that makes it all right to say that because you didn't receive the full amount, that there's even something small that you cannot do.
No. Allow me to finish making my point. In terms of the quantum, the absolute, it matters because when we set expectations on counties, it means that the level of service delivery that they can hope to give us is equal to what they were doing before and won't necessarily be much better.
Right.
So when we are looking at county service delivery, we have to keep this context in mind. It's real. It costs money to deliver services, and they're not getting this money.
Which is very true.
Now,
I've got a
and
question
then
as you continue
and
with that
then
point.
quantum. Then the second point is now this delay in transfers.
Okay.
And we haven't paid much attention as civil society to this. It's a very political process, but it's a year on, year out issue in that they get this last disbursement, and it's usually around that much. It's almost like a rolling arrears of this amount of money, around 50B. This year it's 58B. If you take that amount out of a county budget, what are you saying? And if you look at, let's say, Nairobi County, 70% of the shareable revenue, actually 70% of the county budget is for recurrent expenditure. It means that whatever you withhold is what counties would do development with. Because in real terms,
So
they pay salaries.
I'm gonna ask you a question that will
Yeah.
bring in the context of withholding. But before that, I'll ask you the amount of money that was allocated to counties in the budget last year. How much was it? 316 billion.
After the contestation,
Okay.
it was the amount that.
What
they
percentage of the national budget was that?
Now I can't remember,
just
but
do the math.
it might
Okay.
have been. It might have been what.
Is there anywhere in law that talks about the budget? The percentages of sharing revenue.
Very good. The
Is it in the
Constitution gives a
Constitution?
minimum of 15%.
So by design, we have already said that all these services that you're talking about, by design of our Constitution, we are saying that they're going to be funded by 15% of the budget.
That is wrong, and I'll tell you why. That premise is very, very incorrect, because first of all, the Constitution says a minimum. And when you talk to the crafters of the Constitution, what they said is they looked at local authorities at the time. And actually at the time, local authorities were getting about 23% of revenue. But they looked at what was out there and what was politically acceptable, and they gave a minimum.
Okay.
The process that's supposed to then have taken place, and it was put in law but never happened, was there was supposed to be a costing. There was supposed to be a process where, there was a body that was set up.
Why does a minimum exist?
There was a body that was set up, and this body never did this.
And this is the Transition Authority.
The Transition Authority, where they say, and other countries do this, where they say to deliver health services to
This is
a
how much you
Kenyan,
require.
you need to spend 7,000 Kenya shillings, 15,000 Kenya shillings. And if they're in the marginalized country, it's a little bit more. So that we can get to a little bit more evidence-based, as opposed to saying, we've got 2 trillion shillings and we're going to give counties 300B, jipangeni, because like Abraham said, it is unconscionable that we accept that government can underfund service delivery, which is what they're doing. So I agree with you.
Okay.
Counties have reneged.
The point I was
but
making
also,
was that from the Constitution, we've already put a minimum.
it's when
Then we're working towards now meeting the minimum and surpassing the minimum.
No.
Already. No. Well, this is what we already
But
have.
why
I'm
do you
talking
even
about what
set
we have.
a minimum and
So we
say
have a
it is
you
minimum
can't
of
read a
15,
minimum alone.
And we are working now currently with over 20% of that budget actually going. It's over 24.
No, it's not. It's on 17. And the reason it's on 17, right? It's on 17 because
when you come to the absolutes.
First of all,
When you come to the absolutes,
No,
it'll come
no.
to about 17. So let's
No.
work with the 17.
No.
Let's work with the 17.
It's not
This
just
is a 17.
15%.
This is a 17 that the
15% of
counties.
what? It's 15%
of
of
the
the
last
last
audited budget
right.
and all.
So in Kenya, we are not on last audited.
Yes. So everything else now is
Okay,
on
those
the
are the
whole
factors.
processes and all these other factors. The point
Of
is,
necessity.
Yes, and they are
Yes.
very
They are
very
necessary. Yeah.
The point is here that when county governments are, clamoring for money and all, they're clamoring for money on this particular percentage of 25% or so. And they receive the 800 and whatever, 380 something
316,
billion, 316 billion.
which they don't receive, but it's
which
committed.
comes committed, it's committed and then it comes and there's a
But
huge
they might
delay
not-
of
yeah,
not
yeah.
getting
Which
whatever
inevitably
amount.
will affect the way they are able
It'll
to
affect
transact.
the way
Yeah.
they're able to transact. Let's also give the context of the government and the national government, which is the one that is collecting all the revenue and then putting in this one kitty, and its own revenue collection capabilities.
Right.
So if the national government has already said, we are budgeting and we are already putting a budget of 316 billion because we are estimating that we're going to collect 1.6 trillion, and they don't collect 1.6 trillion, see, it affects everything else.
No, because the principle
what
of
do
the
you mean
Constitution. No, because the principle of the Constitution is not just a minimum of 15%. It's a minimum of 15% to be defined.
It affects the disbursement of the money.
I'm giving you the whole
Cash in
picture in
hand.
revenue share. Revenue share is not just based on the minimum 15% of audited accounts. It's also influenced by Article. I'm forgetting the number of the article. I think
the
it's
Constitution.
203. That speaks to the national, the criteria to be used to determine the quantum. So minimum of 15%, and then there is a list of criteria that will be used to determine the quantum. And this article 203 is actually there's been a case in court since 2016. Because this is the one where you're supposed to have a process of costing the functions. First of all, the Constitution says first thing is debt. These commitments of government, those go immediately. Then you have to look at what are the functions of national government. Those must be costed. You have to look at issues of basic service delivery. Those must be costed. You have to look at issues of inclusion, equity. So I put it to you, the Constitution gives us a framework for determining how to share revenue generated nationally. But this has not happened. So counties are receiving a quantum. They need to
What is
use
the role
that.
of the counties
They
in
need
this
to
whole
use
equation?
that
When we're
responsibly.
talking
We
about
have moved the
reopening,
conversation
when
to
we're talking
budgeting
about
and
reopening,
all.
let's come back to reopening
Yes.
because that's what we are
Hold on.
talking about.
Yeah,
We're
but-
talking
Yes.
about reopening of the economy and counties' responsibility now when it comes to the fact that many individuals are going to be leaving the capital city and going back to the counties, where then we're going to have a burden of disease, whereby we're going to have a burden where people are looking for livelihoods to continue when they go back to these particular counties. Now, that responsibility rests on their shoulders, whether you're given 1 shilling, 10 or 1,000,000. What is the burden of responsibility when it comes to looking after citizens at county level?
Thank you very
Okay.
much. And the answer
Let's
I was
talk
giving.
about that when we come out of this commercial break. 22 minutes after 9. This is a Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation. We'll ask you to join this conversation at some point on 0719-012-600. In the meantime, go to www.kpa.co.ke/Captain Cargo. Cargo is K-A-R-G-O, and Captain Cargo of K-A-R-G-O. This is where you are able to get a lot of information on how KPA basically operates. There's a lot of information that people seek in from counties, and they don't end up getting this kind of information, which is, if I wanted to import something in the country, what are the processes to use? If I wanted to export something and I wanted to use the port of Mombasa or the port of Kisumu as my exit point, what are the processes? What are the procedures? Who do I need to talk to? Which companies come into play? Now, this is what information that is contained in this new portal by the Kenya Ports Authority, which is kpa.co.ke/Captain Cargo. It's a portal where they have put all the information on the processes, simplified visually. You see, you understand. If you don't understand, you ask a question that they are able to also respond right there. So we'll tell you more about this as we proceed with this conversation. It's now 23 minutes after 9.
It's overcast and the fog is quite low in many parts of Nairobi this morning at 16 degrees. Those cloudy conditions will carry on through most of the day with highs of 22. It's cloudy in Nyeri at 16 degrees, chance of showers quite high, highs of 21 and lows of 13 today. It's cloudy in Nakuru as well, thunderstorms forecasted for later in the day with highs of 20 and lows of 12. Eldoret, patches of fog throughout the town this morning, going into thunderstorms later with highs of 17 and lows of 12. Kisumu is mostly cloudy at 22. Showers expected with highs of 26 and lows of 19. And it's cloudy in Kakamega. 23 degrees the high with showers expected for later. Mombasa is mostly cloudy at 26 degrees. We'll see highs of 29. And in Malindi, mostly cloudy as well with 27 degrees currently. And showers expected then with highs of 28. 21 degrees and mostly cloudy is what we see in Kampala when we step out. Thunderstorms expected later with highs of 24 and lows of 18. Partly cloudy conditions in Dar es Salaam will rule the day, highs of 31 and lows of 23. And stepping down south into South Africa, in Johannesburg at 9 degrees, mostly sunny conditions. Sunny conditions carry through, highs of 22 and lows of 6. Take a look into Lagos, where the thunderstorms have already begun at 25 degrees. We'll see highs of 28 and lows of 23, with those thunderstorms taking us well into Wednesday. In Paris at 13 degrees, it's sunny all through today, highs of 24, some clouds dipping later in the evening. It's sunny and at 14 degrees in London, 21 degrees the high and lows of 14. And as we look at New York, inching closely to Tuesday morning, it's cloudy, rain expected later with highs of 28 and lows of 23.
So bringing that conversation back on track, yesterday the president addressed the nation in the steps of Harambe House, his office. The headline in the Standard this morning says, "It's freedom for transport connected. Options were limited and the president chose to err on the side of caution. With easing of travel curbs,
Spice
a
up your
21-day
life.
walk to a longer lockdown may have just begun. Will Kenyans behave?
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself.
The country is yet to achieve the minimums set by the health experts for reopening. The president leads lockdown but warns
Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM.
And said, so people are going to move into the counties, out of the main areas, especially of Nairobi and Mombasa. And then, of course, we also know about Mandera County. But it's mainly Nairobi and Mombasa that people are going to move and go into their shags. And now the counties will now bear the responsibility of the rising numbers and will have to come up with measures to respond to those rising numbers. What are the basics? This is bed capacity.
In hospitals.
In hospitals and isolation centers. This is those that require critical care. Do you have HDUs and ICU capacity in the counties? Are you able to provide that? Those are the ones that we are talking about. Also, testing capacity. Remember, we are talking about yesterday's figures were out of 2,000 samples tested countrywide. Now, take these people across the country. What is our testing capacity going to look like? Are we going to be able to be testing and getting the results in good time from the 47 counties? Are we going to be able to be addressing that and contact tracing and isolating in good time in the 47 counties? Is there capacity by the counties to address this?
I dare say somebody in the Ministry of Health, maybe then who was, or even those officers who sit at county level in the Ministry of Health, slept with a bit of a headache last night, because these are the questions that they would be asking in terms of what exactly are we going to do? Because look, the cases will rise. We're not trying to be doomsday sayers or naysayers or whatever. Just by the design of how things have been happening, the cases will rise. The sentiment of people wanting to leave Nairobi and go away, and we know the reasons why. Livelihoods have been affected. People would rather be at home where they can live a minimalist life for the duration of, this period, and say that, okay, we don't have to spend so much because we don't have it in the first place. And where can we most reasonably operate? It's in the rural home. So this is the decision that people have taken today. At 5 a.m, mass exit of people leaving. You can imagine, as early as yesterday afternoon, people leaving. It is not because there's some euphoria or let me get out of Nairobi and see what's happening on the other side of the world. It is no. It is, should things get worse later, let it find me where I will be able to survive. Now, not taking into consideration the stark reality that anybody who is infected now is essentially taking this disease to the less vulnerable. To the more vulnerable, rather. The more vulnerable, right? But the reason why they are moving is just because of this. It is not now that counties should be scrambling to prepare. I'm sorry. But that train has left the station. If this preparation had not taken place a month ago, then right now we're going to be... Dr. Correa told us this one we are chasing. And again, we find ourselves still chasing after COVID.
The thing has lapped us twice.
I'm telling you. And now here we're going into another situation whereby we're saying, okay, guess what? We have another migration of people, right? It's going to happen. Leave it. And we seem to think that those were empty cells where people didn't exist. And that is only the people who are leaving from the urban areas who are going to fill. No, there were people who were there before. So now you're increasing the burden on the counties. Preparedness is not something that you do on the job. Preparedness, by virtue of definition, means that before something should have been done. And exactly, you're going to see where those who had taken, number one, the initiative, used the resources that were available to them at that time, and then peppered it with some thinking and proper planning, are the ones who are going to be able to beat this thing. Otherwise, I'm sorry, but it's going to be a very difficult situation over the next 3 weeks. And this is what we're looking at now.
I fully agree with you. Let's be very careful, though, not to buy into the narrative that this government tries to propagate that about counties. Devolution in Kenya is about 2 levels of government, and this is the point I was making, Article 6.2. And these governments are to conduct their mutual relations on a basis of cooperation, coordination, and consultation. And the whole design of our devolution is based on that, including the funding, including managing these services. So yes, health is a function of the counties. And it's the responsibility of the political leadership to respond. But this in no way exonerates the national government. There is no way, actually that statement is misleading. That's political spin.
Actually,
because,
I don't think one to exonerate the national government.
Or that it has sought to be exonerated.
No,
an emergency,
we're just focusing on what the county governments ought to do.
No, and we're in agreement, and I think we're in agreement on that. But the point I am making is that when we look at this response, and at the end of the day, and this happens, and in fact, we've even brought it out with the Controller of Budget in her reports. We say, when you give a report on a county, you must remember sometimes counties will do or fail to do because the national government did not do. So we have to balance the story. We have to track the process at both levels. I'll give you an example, I'll give you a practical example.
I actually want to ask this question to support what you're saying. On average, since you have the figures, what percentage of the monies that are initially allocated to counties do they actually get? Because they never get all of it, but what percentage do they get on average?
Now you do that math. It's 70, maybe about 80, 70. 90. Maybe 70.
Yes. Now, do we see a corresponding 70% improvement or work in the counties taking place?
Improvement from what?
Whatever it is that they have. Do we see,
improvement
for instance,
from what?
Every
be
sector.
Specific. You want to be
specific.
specific.
Do you feel the
for
impact
instance,
of the 70%?
Yes, we feel the impact. If you
in
look
the counties, all counties in this country?
Excuse me, there are 47 counties with 47 political leaders. And that means you will have differentials in political leadership. That is a fact. But if we're looking at devolution as a whole, government's own report, in terms of the health outcomes, there's been a steady improvement. Government's own report, in terms of agriculture, and agriculture funding, by the way, has been falling under this government. It has been falling, but despite it falling, the outcomes have been improving. Why? Because a governor is on the ground. A governor is looking for extension workers. They are on his payroll. You know, it's become personal. So, yes, there are improvements. Yes, there are improvements. But But the point I was making to you, and it's not I speak, there is data, and it's national government public expenditure review data. The
This same
point I
national
was
government
making,
that-
the point I was making is you will not see an improvement. And the reason you won't see an improvement is you're not seeing the investment. Counties are making do with what they get. And some counties, like we had yesterday, will then go and spend a lot on health. But what he told us, if you listen to the governor yesterday, is yes, I have spent on health. And twice he said, but it means I have made sacrifices.
There are sacrifices
That
elsewhere.
means if you go to his county, there are things you will look at and say, why haven't you done this? And he'll say,
Some things will be exposed in some counties and others. However,
thank you.
just
So
you
the
know,
point
talking-
we are making is counties get sufficient money that they will give us a level of service. But let us not talk about like when
But let's
when
also-
CT asks, is it improving? I'm telling you, it won't improve. How is it going to improve? Because the money is not improving. So we
No, no,
will.
no.
It
We-
won't,
not
it
what
won't
I
improve
asked.
immediately, and also
That's
at the
not
same
what
time,
I
yeah,
asked.
and it will not improve. And
there's
in
also
fact,
there's also something that's coming out, and it's
have
coming
we
out
agreed?
as if the
you know,
national
now
government
you're
is the one
moving
that
to a different
decides.
conversation without us closing one.
It's
Have
as
we
if-
agreed as a basic? If counties get the same or decreasing
I am on that point.
decreasing amount of money, the quality of service
I am on that
cannot
point.
improve. The
County-
best they can do is hold
County
it
governments
constant.
do
No.
not receive handouts from the national government. And I
Who
started
said
by
it's a
saying it is
handout?
not a handout. It
It's
is
a
not a decision that is
constitutional- it's a
made.
constitutional
And it's not a
right.
decision that's made by the national government sitting unilaterally deciding how much I'm going to give you. There is a mechanism for agreeing how much money is going to counties.
What mechanism
There is a
this?
body called the IBEC, the
Right.
Intergovernmental Budget and Economic Council,
Right.
that sits at the beginning of every year and discusses and agrees.
And
like you
agrees.
said, principles of the Constitution
Are applied.
are applied
And does
in
that
terms of
process always
collaboration.
work?
Now, IBEC sits with the Council of Governors
And the CRA?
brings in the CRA and brings
No,
in
CRA recommends and then
and
goes to
the,
IBEC.
the national government also sits in, but the majority of the membership is from the counties.
Of who?
Of IBEC.
Well,
It-
okay.
it has
it's an
represent-
intergovernmental
It
body.
has
It's not
yes,
no majority.
There's
It's an
participation.
No.
There's participation.
Let's be accurate,
There is
please. It
not
matters.
majority. Fine, I have agreed.
No.
There is participation.
There
This
is
is what I wanted to say. Can I say what I
intergovernmental
wanted?
dialogue.
Just,
Yes.
Eric, please.
What I wanted to say is there is participation of county governments in this conversation of how much money and how much we are doing.
I have a problem with that statement because participation is when I go as the public and participate. Counties do not participate. They have a government-to-government dialogue. So when you're
But
having...
is that not participation?
No.
No, these are
When you're
semantics.
having... It's
Okay,
not
which word do you want-
semantics.
which word do you want us to
It's
use?
not semantics.
Okay, let's use the word
if
you want
you're
us to use. What
arbitrating
word-
a
what word do you want
conflict
us to
between
use?
people, you don't say one is participating, the other... No.
When
It's
you
not an
say have-
arbitration.
it's
This
a
body is
dialogue.
not an
You
arbitration
know,
It's a
body.
dialogue.
I'm getting the
It is a
impression when zero.
participatory.
It is not.
It is a
That
participatory
This
not.
discussion is
conversation.
only complete if the national government is demonized as much as we possibly
No.
can.
Counties
point
sit
is,
with the
what
national
I'm trying-
government and they agree on these things.
And
It's
we're
a
talking about
intergovernmental
disbursement of funds.
budget and what?
It's an intergovernmental budget dialogue platform.
Yes.
Intergovernmental, IBEC. Intergovernmental Budget Economic
Council. Yes. They discuss these things.
Yes,
So the decision
good.
that is made
They
already
discuss.
has come from a point where they have all agreed. All of them have agreed
Very good.
that this
In theory.
316
In theory.
in theory,
Thank you.
whatever you want to go, this 316 is what is going to go to the counties this year. Now you guys are going to
Excellent. I'm with you
run
there.
in the budget.
Kabisa.
So
Kabisa.
already it's not a decision that's made from one top. Now we are coming to, and you've said, if you go,
No, don't add that last bit. You know, we are here to be accurate. Last year, what happened? It's not a decision that's coming from one angle. I agree. But what happened last year?
what happened last year, there
Yeah.
was a back and forth. And one day we'll have this conversation. What exactly was it that was happening last year on the 6th year of devolution? We have not had this kind of back and forth in the previous 5 years.
We have
Context.
We've had it. It's gone into mediation each time.
Yes.
Last year
And that is
something
normal.
happened, and if you look at the court ruling, by the way, what came out is that national government is violating, has usurped power.
Yes.
So
True,
we
true,
don't.
true.
We're not here to.
But
And we had the conversation with Kamodo Waiganjo.
Another time we'll have it in terms of context. What
So
exactly
what we are
were
saying
the,
in
were the
principle-
circumstances that was making the national government behave the way it was behaving last year?
No.
Even in terms of debt and the rising debt and the debt obligations for that budget. So anyway, that's not the
let's
conversation.
have a constructive conversation
That
because
is
we are
not the-
looking at the
that is
COVID
not the
response.
it is a COVID
and the
response.
basic,
Wanjiru,
In
the
terms-
we are
basic
having a
point.
constructive conversation.
The
In
basic
terms of
point
COVID
is
response,
what are we trying to
in
establish?
terms of COVID response, are our counties prepared? Do our counties have the capacity to deal with what we are seeing is going to be a rise in numbers in the counties?
And my point to you is, I think some counties will be prepared, and they'll be prepared because if you look at the county budget health allocations, about 1/3 of counties spend at least 25% or more of their budget on health alone.
Spending
So
on health
counties-
doesn't mean they improve the health systems. It doesn't. It just means that money is spent. Is there evidence to support the fact that it's the same thing that I asked you with the 70%? If you spend 25%, it's in the budget, it's been spent. Is there a corresponding development that
To that
was
spend?
Yes.
Yeah, so the
To
point
the
I was
spend.
making is because there are counties that have been investing in health. One, if a county is investing in health, you make some very clear assumptions. Number one, they'll have some good infrastructure. Number two, they have the policy framework and they are oriented. Those kind of counties therefore have the kind of leadership that is going, you will see those counties doing better. Like you will see in Machakos, they might not have the disease burden, unfortunately. You might have a heavy disease burden in a county, like Nairobi. Nairobi is atypical because obviously there's now, the health function has actually been taken over. But if you have a county that has not been spending on health, has not prioritized health, and they have a heavy disease burden, we will have a problem. So the point I'm making is very simple. Political leadership comes into play because ultimately counties spend based on the policies of the political leadership. And those counties that have not prioritized, hopefully, since the outbreak,
They'll be exposed.
have prepared themselves. And I agree completely. The time to prepare is not now. The time to have prepared, if they did not have an emergency response, had not been investing adequately, by now they should have those safeguards in place. In that context, we must recognize that counties will not bear this burden alone. There is no way we can say, oh, counties failed, counties succeeded. If counties succeed, the other part of the story is also national government. So what we need to see is the continued collaboration between the national and the county. And I was going to give you a practical example. For instance, we'll say water. Water has to be made available. If water is going to be made available, there's still a contentious issue between counties and, well, it's parliament, it's not really the national government, about the control of water companies. So if a county wants to enact legislation that impacts the water company, there are some legal impediments in terms of saying we're going to give free water. So these are the points where there has to be dialogue around, let us make this possible. Counties might say we need to run respirators, electricity. Electricity reticulation is actually a county function, but in the way devolution has been being implemented, it hasn't been. National government has been doing the last mile and some of these reticulation aspects. Therefore, there has to be coordination between the national and the county. Let's even look at agriculture. Agriculture function is also fully devolved. But national government still retains part of the budget and some of the sub-functions like procurement of fertilizer and everything. So there has to be intergovernmental. Now, the point I am making to you and what Kenyans need to understand is counties succeed based on political leadership, of course, accountability, but also intergovernmental. So we must always continue to pressure the national government to play its part to enable counties devolution
We must
to
continue
succeed. So
to
devolution
pressure
has
both
two legs.
levels of
I think
government.
it has-
That is a simple thing.
If we don't pressure both levels of government, then it appears as if it's the national government that has failed to fight COVID. Or if we just pressure the county government, it appears as if it's one. But even for now, since the beginning of the fight against COVID, it's the counties and national government that have been working together.
Look at examples
Counties,
of
from
counties who
the
stood
chairman
out.
of the health committee in the Council of Governors sits in the National Emergency Response Committee. The last 30 days, governors have been having this weekly conference with the president to discuss the response. Even now, it's not that the president is saying, now I've left it, it's for the counties. It is basically saying we are scaling up, but there are some areas and aspects that counties will have direct responsibility and a direct role. For example, acquisition of beds, setting aside the bed capacity, and all that is directly going to be county responsibility. The
In my
national
view,
government is going to be able to support in some areas,
They have to.
but they have to work together.
In my
those
view,
that are
one of
ready
the
will be
critical areas-
shown, and those that are not ready will also be exposed.
Agreed. And unfortunately, with devolution, this is one of the, with the political freedom, because devolution is really about transferring political power to the local level, then the citizens are given the political freedom to choose their own leader and hold that leader to account. So those areas that have weak, unaccountable leadership will suffer the consequence of their actions.
Yep.
And that's devolution is that it's like a double-edged sword. But yes, you were saying I really champion for counties, for devolution. Yes, ever since devolution was implemented, government data shows there are improved service delivery outcomes, and this is despite
Is it per
underfunding.
county?
This is despite underfunding. This is despite disputes, like I've mentioned, in terms of functions.
Some counties are stronger than others,
and
but there is
always.
So cumulatively,
Will
you
always
get
be.
results that seem to be good. That's why I asked.
And some areas
county
that,
by county, the results will always show disparity. That is to be expected.
Yep. Have we done traffic? No, we haven't done traffic. So let's take a look at traffic. And before we do that, let's take a look at maritime traffic. Right? Kenya Ports Authority, new portal, Captain Cargo. What does it show in terms of the importation?
When we look at some of the things that were always issues, that's it, processing documents. You've got this document, that document, the other, you're not really sure where to start. So the portal makes it a little bit easier when it comes to that. And they've gone through very easy 12 steps that you can go through from, cargo inspection to issuing of certificates to where your cargo has been loaded, consignments destined for Kenya, how you can actually go and pick those up. So you actually know what is supposed to be happening at each stage from the time your cargo leaves, its point, wherever its point of origin, and then now its final destination, which would be Mombasa, in this case. So you have 12 steps that you should be able to follow through. So, if there's a kink in a chain, one step hasn't gone through, then you have to, circle back and do it. So they've made it very easy here so that, one, nobody can lie to you. You're not going to have to go and spend money where you don't need to. You don't need somebody to do something for you that you would, to employ resources and pay. You can actually go through this and find out. So 12 steps been made extremely easy than now when you're importing your cargo. Yep.
Right, and remember you can access this portal by going to www.kpa.co.ke/Captain Cargo, and cargo is with a K, K-A-R-G-O. 12 minutes to 10. Let's take a look at what's happening on the roads now that imefunguliwa.
All right, still the situation that we saw earlier on Thika Road is still going to be like that for some time. Not so bad on Mombasa Road right now. Things have gotten a little bit better as we get towards 10 o'clock. Juja Road was looking a little bit crazy, but that is looking a little bit better now. The cops along Kangunda Road are very busy this morning, trying to keep traffic at bay. So we're looking at likely more and heightened traffic on these particular areas. We'll see what it looks like throughout the rest of the day. I'm going to ask you to keep safe in everything that you do. Spice FM KE, that's how you can get in touch with us in case of anything after 10 o'clock.
Spice FM. Spice up your life. Traffic.
So you've talked about the historical responsibility, the response that we've seen by the national and county government. What's expected to be seen in the national and county government? Let's also talk about personal responsibility. What's expected of you as you live in this country, aware of fighting COVID-19? All those measures in place, all the information that has been shared. I mean, right now, if they conducted a poll, almost everybody knows about COVID-19. The level of believing and trusting the information that they've received may vary. Those that say, COVID gone,
That's different.
it's still there. But at least everybody knows, and everybody knows why you're wearing a mask, why you see people wearing masks. Everybody knows why you need to wash your hands. Everybody understands why you need to maintain physical distancing. But that physical responsibility is also something that even the WHO has said. The director of Health Emergency Program at WHO, Dr. Michael Ryan, said this about personal choices.
Every person needs to look.
That's it.
Love it.
The bottom line is, but what he's saying is that you need the information so that you can make that decision.
You know how, as he was talking, two things came to mind. Number one, we are a very socially interconnected society, and it feels wrong not to embrace, not to interact.
Not to hug, not to...
So already, and I think that learning has happened in some parts and not everywhere. I don't think everyone has distanced, right? There are parts that I think so still. And yesterday, the governor said yes, they've done education in the county, and he didn't give us details, because for me I was like, what education is this? But I don't think it's just the county government. I think it's us who we engage with. We really need to encourage people to keep the distance, despite it feeling it feels wrong, it feels it's against our
Odd,
religion,
yeah.
it's against everything that we know, it's against our fiber. We need to do it. And then the second thing for me is, he says, think about you, but I also think culturally we don't think, we might be quite selfish people as Kenyans, this man-eat-man society, but a lot of times Kenyans do things for others. So even man-eat-man, when you're acquiring, you're always thinking, I'm going to send home. So for us, our motivation is very much others.
Yeah.
So maybe if we can just tell people, like I told my daughter yesterday when she was saying, oh, WHO says, I tell her, it doesn't matter what you believe. People are dying, and we are in the age group that is dying. So if you get it and bring it to us, we will die. And she was like, okay, I get that. So we need to talk to people,
You need to bring it home.
Bring it home. And maybe all of us need to go onto our list and just talk to those people that we talk to and make sure we're on the same page. Let's own this process up.
One thing that the governor said yesterday that I found particularly interesting was that he has also invested in individuals who've been trained and who go to every corner of his constituency, specifically the remoter areas, and talk to people about this. And it isn't once, it isn't twice.
And also using local leadership and opinion leaders.
Yes, to ensure that this, essentially using local personnel, but training these people so that they can train the others. Now, this is where training becomes extremely important. Now, Areas that suffered from the epidemic of HIV have an advantage over other areas right now in this matter. Because you already have people who are trained in counseling. You already have people who are trained in communicating to people about diseases. You just need to now train them about this particular one. But they have that advantage. Now, one of the things that I found which was unfortunate with many county governments in areas that had high prevalence of HIV, they didn't pay these workers.
Yeah. Community health volunteers,
They didn't pay them.
They
And
don't.
you know the amount which was being asked? 2,000 shillings a month.
That's it.
Per person.
That's
Per
it.
person. That's it. And somehow they couldn't come around to paying it.
It's a mindset.
This is the point. I was actually getting to this. I was saying that in many counties, the idea of pilfering is greater than the idea of budgeting. Budgeting and planning is for money to arrive so
come
that
in.
it can be pilfered.
Not
And
for
when they are
development,
asked to
not for
account, a lot
future.
of the noise that county leadership makes, they are being asked to account for it. And their pushback is that we didn't get enough money. Instead of accounting for what
For what
it
you've
is
gotten.
they were given, their pushback is we don't have enough money.
Some things are done just to check the boxes. You come up with
That's
a
it.
CIDP, the
That's-
Integrated
that's it,
Development
that's it,
Plan.
that's it.
It's supposed to be a 5-year, 10-year. It's there.
It's always beautifully written, but
And with that, now you shall budget.
yes, and with that you hope to get money. Now, oddly enough, the ministry that deals with devolution, together with the assistance of UNDP, have come up with a plan in which they have a number of volunteers who've been trained to go into at least 15 counties that are considered to have a high prevalence. Now, this sounds good, but for me, this is the sort of thing that I find is negative, and I'm going to say why. Do we need to wait for UNDP to fund such a thing when you actually have personnel who can actually do it? Because the moment you do this, you know what you've done? You are furthering that culture of dependency. Because if some counties get it, others will say, why is it that us, we're not getting these people who are trained? Why aren't you sending these people to us? It is good that UNDP has come in. It is good that they have given us money. But the unfortunate thing, what donations of this nature have shown us in this country is that they've created dependencies. And so our people sit and think and plan based on these things.
Yeah.
The country is replete with such examples. If you want to look at the entire blood crisis, what happened with that? It's the same thing. The culture of dependency that put us there, that put,
That we
that
put
particular
ourselves
sector
into.
Yep.
Yes.
in the first place.
The reason we don't
Across
have a cancer
board.
center yet
Same thing.
must be because we've been trying to find out who is going to fund it.
Yes.
The one of the things we are finding we have in terms of a development approach, and it's driven by interests around procurement, is this idea that development is about infrastructure. So we talked this morning about national government and the president and his flagship projects, and when you spend on those flagship projects, it takes money away from services. The same thing is happening at county level, where you have a governor who doesn't have enough money because of the reasons we've also discussed, who has this little for development, but instead of putting it into investing in community health-based structures, would rather then go and build some structure so that he can be remembered by
Yep.
he built
People will
this.
remember
And
that.
of course,
By
and there are some.
posterity.
Yep.
So we have a problem, a lack of investment by the counties in their community health systems, in the local level dispensaries. They'd rather build a larger, bigger hospital where you're saying maybe you needed the small dispensaries to be better equipped.
I spoke
So
to a
these
governor
are
as
the
we conclude. I
weaknesses.
spoke to a governor who was telling me, look, I spent so much money redoing the roads to Maram level, just grading roads and upgrading some of those roads. Rains came, everything has gone to the Indian Ocean. People don't even talk to me anymore about those roads. They forgot. So they have that kind of, headache as well.
Yeah.
So I'd
Yeah,
rather
some
I'd rather put up a structure that
Oh,
people
I
will always
see.
remember. You see, this guy, he
Yeah.
built a hospital here. He built a ward here.
Or at
In-
best,
in-
the best
in fact,
toilet in East Africa.
Yeah.
What we are finding with the debt campaign, corruption is a problem, but also our mindset of what is development,
Yep.
and especially investing in people, community, like what you're saying, community systems. If the beauty is, on a positive note, the Senate picked that issue, and they actually have a bill. And in their proposals on COVID, they actually did a budget for community health workers. So hopefully we'll see COVID again becomes an opportunity, for
opportunity for us to
structures
see
that
things.
are needed.
Yeah.
Because if you put in community health structures, by the way, you reduce disease burden. Because they are a frontline on public health.
True.
You know, so
End of the show. Thank you very much, Wanjiru.
you know, it's so rude when you do that, but
I have been trying to signal you don't
oh,
get my
really? I
signal.
wasn't looking.
It's
eh?
very rude
No,
of you to
she
ignore my
knew you're
signals.
just waving at
Yeah.
hands.
No, I didn't see.
How are you?
I didn't see.
CT today's
Last time I
proverb.
looked, there was a lot of time there.
Today's proverb.
For the sake of peace in the studio,
Some
hard decisions must be made.
I've decided to kind of forgive Latif for today. Pick it up
you.
tomorrow.
Let's have peace. See you again tomorrow, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Good morning.